He is willing to be a man.
Knowing that people probably don't.
That might be.
Yeah, we don't have like an
Money, clearly, that you could hire and share.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know that, but it's. So he sent.
I read the.
I have a fixated blue sheets scattered all around my office. Maybe they'll make it into the right drawer. That's great. Obviously, talk to you a couple of things.
I understand. You know.
What's up? Father, that should be remembered.
Like, I think you should.
Plenty of those that I've been in the old.
Yes. No, I mean, I know.
No, I'm sorry.
It's really stuck with me that one time.
Thank you for that.
For your wording on this, so you're like, I agree with your husband, because I'm like, oh, I often agree to disagree with my husband. That's no, there's
Throwing them around too.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, can I have one back for Shuggy?
Yes, sir.
I agree.
You haven't changed from the info. It's last the same. It's just like.
You think it's really wild that I break, you know, if we got our business. But I can't.
I just do it not as just for myself. So it's just, it's just like very number. So I would say. So it's going to
Your roads.
Very nice.
well, that's water.
Yeah.
All people have some meaning in them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I also.
So,
like, no, I
you
was.
realize-
I was in college, but.
Pretty many safe.
By living in there, so I have much fear time. Finding out, there's a lot of times to be afraid of
Would ask me.
because it's hard.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel that.
A lot of
That.
Yeah. I thought I did things, but. A lot more like. He just part, that is not, that's what I was saying, that's what I mean.
I would assume that they would have to like figure out.
Yeah.
I it's not.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't understand. But then he understands. Very worried about it.
I would definitely ask for so much.
Hold on. Oh, no.
I was ready.
Like, I do that. What I have heard, very comfortably. Be sitting down by the back, came up for it. Long over. That's why I'll get the side of it even.
Yeah.
Somebody might have been. Yeah. Yeah.
That's obviously.
No,
I know. I totally, I mean, I know Absolutely.
No, absolutely.
And I think also,
Like, I don't know if you remember, but they, that's that, right, the company, but they came from CB12. Like,
yeah.
Because they're all starting to.
Yeah, well, like,
You were.
Yeah,
So.
I know, they're-
Yeah.
We're at.
I feel like I used to be. Every single thing. I know, it's been a great. It's crazy.
So folks, good evening on this Tuesday, June 25th. So someone has a very nice cell phone ring. I appreciate it. That's all right. It happens. So first things first.
Carl speaks, harps play.
Oh, I already told my voice is loud, right? And so first things first, we have representatives from the Department of City Planning, AKA DCP here. So could the two of you stand up and introduce yourselves, and the board members will introduce ourselves around the table.
Good evening, it is I, Dan. From the city planning.
Second.
Going by my colleague.
I'm Veronica. I work in the Department of City Planning's Housing Division, specifically on this text amendment. So I'm here to support with any answers to questions.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for, and so we will go around the table with the board members and introduce ourselves. And so I'm Carl Henry Cesar. I go by Carl and I am the chairperson.
Glenn Wolin, board person.
Joel Siegel, board person.
Nina Sapir, board person.
Arnold Parker, board president.
Gail Smith, board person.
Niamat Bendat, board person.
Hatem El Gamasi, board member.
Steve Cohen, board member.
Elizabeth Daniels, board member.
Susan Phillips, board member.
Melissa Minnick, board member.
Pardon, Prasad, board member. David Khan, board member.
Enzo Washington, board member. Oh, Greg Alvarez, board member.
You got the city right here.
Yeah, I'm doing one on that side.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, sure.
Thanks. Oh, Sean Campbell, the hired help.
Okay. And so folks, this committee of the whole hearing is called to order on Tuesday, June 25th at Brooklyn Community Board 14 District Office, 810 East 16th Street at 6:30 PM. For folks' edification, committee of the whole is a mechanism through which community board members present at the committee of the whole meeting can act as the full board during the board's charter directed summer recess. So what this means is the board members present in this room are acting on behalf of the full board. And so the recommendations that are voted on tonight will be the final CB14 actions on these remaining City of Yes housing opportunity items. And as chair, I will report these results to the full board at a regularly monthly meeting in September. And so the purpose of this hearing is to invite public comment and then finalize recommendations for the remaining items on a proposed zoning text amendment referred to as the City of Yes for a housing opportunity. So these recommendations will be registered with the Department of City Planning by July 8th and are to be considered by the City Planning Commission at their public hearing in the fall at a later date to be determined. And so DCP, I do have a question. Given that community boards need to submit their feedback by July 8th, what is the latest date that members of the public can submit their testimony to community boards and also directly to DCP?
The public hearing is July 10th, the Department of City Planning.
Okay.
The CPC votes will be in the fall. You know, that date has not been determined, but will be at the end of summer in the fall. And so I believe people will be allowed to continue to submit individual written testimony before the CPC vote. So between the public hearing and the vote, so like, August and July, August, and whenever the meeting is, they can submit their testimony. We'll follow up with the exact date for the vote.
Could you speak louder, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. You want me to repeat myself? Yeah.
Stand.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So we did.
I was just clarifying that the public hearing for the CPC is scheduled for July 10th. And then there'll be a CPC vote at the end of the summer, beginning of the fall. That date has not been determined yet. So the question was about when people submit written testimony, either as individuals or community boards. And so that's anytime between the public hearing and the vote, the CBC will do its best to consider that testimony.
So that's between now and July 10th.
July 10th and the vote, which is at the end of August, maybe September.
So, okay, just to be clear.
Yeah.
So you can submit something in writing between the dates, July 10th or now.
Well, as a CB, you can submit your recommendations tonight, but as an individual, you would sign up to testify on July 10th for the public hearing. And if you're providing written testimony, I believe that same portal will remain open afterwards.
So essentially, there's like two separate processes. So Community Board 14, we have to submit our recommendations by July 8th. For people, for the non-community board related stuff, you have from July 10th till, as Veronica said, sometime in August/whenever that city planning commission hearing is, to submit your individual respective testimony.
To put a finer point on it, you can submit your testimony now directly to CPC. You're testifying here to inform the decision of this board tonight. But following this meeting, you can go directly to CPC or your city council members to express any concerns, interests, et cetera. And that's all the way. So July 10th is DCP's public hearing. Between July 10th and at a date, either August, September, where they will have their final vote. You will have all of that time to provide anything else in writing.
And is it true that people could also go to that public hearing and do verbal testing?
Yes, it's July 10th, beginning at 10 a.m. We expect it to go all day long. So, yeah, you're welcome to come, testify either the board or individual at that meeting.
And the location.
It's at the Department of City Planning, which is 120 Broadway,
Right.
in the City Planning Commission's meeting space, which is in the basement of 120 Broadway. And it'll also be posted online as well.
And on our website.
So thank you very much. Rebecca. Appreciate that. All right. So just to give folks, again, a reminder of the context. And so on April 29th, 2024, the Department of City Planning began the formal public review process by referring out the City of Yes for Housing Opportunities Citywide Zoning Text Amendment, ULURP number N240290ZRY and CEQR 24 DCP 033Y. The application for the zoning text amendment is subject to community board review. And as we were just talking about before, comments and recommendations on this application are due by July 8th, 2024. And so CB14 has held 2 public housing and land use committee meetings with DCP. We had March 31st and May 8th for preliminary and CD14 focus previews, a public hearing on June 11th, and a general board meeting on June 17th, during which the board voted and passed recommendations that emerged from a June 11th public hearing. And so what we will do here is we do have some pre-registered speakers and people who sign up to speak here. And so we will start with the pre-registered speakers. What I am asking the pre-registered speakers, though, is please limit your testimony to the remaining items that we will be discussing today. And so that is my ask for those who have signed up, who are pre-registered to speak. So I see we have a Sean Ezra Philly.
Yes.
Okay, so Sean, how much are you aware of how much do you know of the City of Yes Housing Opportunities? And the reason I ask is just because there were 5 items that we looked at in our last public hearing. And so my question for you is your public testimony related to those 5 items or the remaining items that we haven't looked at?
I don't know what 5 items you guys.
Okay, understood. So so very high level, the 5 items that we reviewed were transit-oriented development. We then reviewed accessory dwelling units, and then we reviewed district fixes. We then reviewed town center zoning, and then we reviewed costly parking amendments. The items that we have left to review, and I apologize because I'm putting a lot at you, so I apologize for that.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
No, I work with Department of Building, so we were trained on
this zoning resolution.
Mhm.
For the commercial, but not for the housing part, because the commercial part was voted on.
Mhm.
So the housing part had some comments.
Okay,
It was
so then-
mostly for the,
Proceed with allowing.
So then, is it gonna be too hard to filter it through?
I think so.
That's fine.
and we had the final discussion.
Yes, so inform the final discussion.
Okay, so then basically, so for those who can't hear me in the back, what I'm hearing from the district manager and the co-chair of the housing land use is that this is a big enough and complicated item where, being that restrictive on the public testimony may be too hard. And then also the second point is after we finish going through the remaining items, then we as a board also need to come to a consensus on our overall recommendation, because for submitting our information into the zoning application portal, we're required to put in our comments for each of the 15 items plus an all rating. And so that's the conversation that was happening in front. So then Sean, what I will then say is, can you just come up here and you will have a 2-minute limit.
2 minutes.
Yes. And wait, give me a second, let me start.
Got it.
You can
Got it.
stand if you like, you can sit if you like.
We have you, go ahead.
Yeah, so I flagged 2 items, but I go with 1 because I think that's sufficient and you don't have a whole lot of time. And I think I'm gonna go with 1 single issue and see if you have the quorum for that. My issue is with legalizing basement building and backyard garage conversion. Seems like it's like a temporary solution or Band-Aid because we lack sufficient public housing, what competes for the market. And the fact that it is also respond to the fact that basement units already exist informally. There's safety issues with that. And also I was inspector before, now I'm a plan examiner in the Department of Buildings. When I was inspector, there's not enough laws, and I see it with this resolution that there's no issued Department of Building code or zoning law that it's for inspectors to be able to enforce it. And also as a plan examiner, I didn't see really enough information about the for us to be able to review for something like legalizing basement dwellings. And I think it's a sensitive issue because I remember I issued a lot of violations for basements. If it's legalizing it and, okay, let me say this. When it was illegal, you could get a warrant from the city to go in and issue, violations or what have you. And there's a lot of issues based.
Okay, and that was discussed at a previous meeting. A recommendation is on record and we can, I can fill you in on that more.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So there's a definition between.
You have to be recognized by the chair to speak.
Sorry.
And so I'll address your comment later. So thank you very much, Sean.
okay.
And so the next speaker do we have Geraldine Coles?
Chair, point of order, can we ask to minimize clapping just so that we can get through this promptly?
Oh, we will. I got you.
Thank you.
That's fine. So, do I have a Geraldine Coles?
Right here.
Hello, great. So right up here. And then you let us know when you are ready and you have 2 minutes.
Yeah. So I represent the First Terrace Association and we have concerns that as of the right of development of multiple family dwelling buildings among single family homes will result in a hodgepodge of incompatible housing types in Victoria and Flatbush. No one will be examining the impact of the specific development on shadows, parking, and other important elements that need to be looked at before approving such development. The plan also calls for bringing back single room occupancy dwellings. I think they're being called sharing, which the city banned, I believe in the 70s for good reason. What assurances do we have for reasons for the original ban of such arrangements will not reoccur? We do want to put on record that we do support the town center zoning, the additional housing and commercial corridors closest to the Brighton subway line stations and also served by local and express buses.
Thank you so much. Folks, please get hold of the platform. Thank you. All right, so.
It's,
So the next speaker we have, Joe Enright.
Chair, I was just gonna rant more about the low density houses, I'll say this time. But I would like to thank the board, for their patience and the lack of acrimony here, that you displayed. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, board member. Thank you, excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Enright. Thank you. So let's see, yes. So let's see, do I have a Nancy Cruz? Okay, do I have a Malcolm Dubose?
By John.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Dubose. So then what we will then do is we will now go to the time portion of this. And what's going to happen is.
no, that's mine.
Okay, and so we're on the time portion, and so what this means now is the next item up for discussion is this a pre-registered? Okay, sorry about that, I jumped ahead of the gun. Before we get to the time portion, there is another pre-registered speaker that I forgot to read their name, I apologize. Is there an Aviva Suter or Suche?
My testimony did not address those 5 points that you mentioned, but I just want to say that I have lived in this community of Victorian Flatbush because we don't differentiate the neighborhoods from Beverly Square West or Fitness Park or Prospect Park South. Those of us who have lived here continue to consider it one Victorian Flatbush neighborhood. I moved in as a high school student. That was a long time ago. And I just want to say that it's so inappropriate. We moved in as renters, because we dress people say, oh, it's a rich people thing. My father was a carpenter. We moved in as renters. We were so happy to be able to find a rental apartment in one of these gracious homes. I went on to marry, buy a home in this neighborhood. My mother and father who were renters went on to buy a 2-family neighborhood, and that home is still rented out to renters. This is a very divisive rezoning proposal. It's the landmark districts against the non-landmark districts, and there is no differentiation. They were built at the same time by the same builders, designed by the same architects, and does nothing for affordable housing. The crummy neighborhoods will stay crummy, and more wealthy people will move into this area. We cannot support it.
Thank you.
Instead, the money will be better served expanding the subway lines.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your testimony, Anita. Appreciate that. And apologies for missing you when I was going through the list of people.
Forgiven.
Appreciate it. And so we will now go to the time portion of our committee of the whole meeting. And so the next item up is universal affordability preference. Okay, and so we have it up there. I am setting a time of 10 minutes for discussion for this item. And so who would like to lead?
And this is board members are leading this?
Yes, this is board members who are leading this discussion. So I see board member Janice, yes.
Yeah, from the previous discussions and how we had wanted to exclude Victorian Flatbush neighborhoods from rezonings. We had also trying to synergize a few things I heard at the last board meeting. We'd also noted that we still need to find other places to make housing, which I agree with very strongly. And this is a proposal that would both do that in the medium and higher density areas as opposed to the lower density areas, which many, including people in this room, do not want to see changed. So I think that if we want to be serious about trying to solve the housing crisis in some way, we need to look to things like this. Also heard a lot of calls at all of the meetings today, just now, the previous meeting, the full board meeting, and the public hearing that we had a while ago asking for affordability. This is a process for affordability that would dovetail really well with the state's 485X. And it's also, I just wanted to note that I'm really excited that it's allowing for a deeper affordability mix than any of the other voluntary programs. So I think that would really help our district. I know that's come up in our district needs a lot. So just wanted to open the discussion saying I think that this is a great thing that would solve a lot of people's concerns here.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for that, Board Member Lee. So I see Board Member Alfonso and then Board Member Barth.
So the issue that I have with this specific item is the definition of affordability by the number that they have here. So they have it as 65,220. And if that is somebody's salary on average, that is $31.26 an hour. And the average New Yorker makes about 51,000 in salary, which comes out to about $24.91 an hour. So that, by definition of New York, is not affordable. And not to make it personally, but I don't even make this myself, so this is not even affordable for me. So I would not approve, but give a condition that if the number would be lowered, then that would be something that is more affordable for the people who are in the city. Because this is just not feasible at all, especially with income of one person. So.
Thank you very much, Board Member Alfonso. So I have Board Member Barton and then Board Member Sadkier.
Quick question to DCP, just the way it's written, it just says affordable at 60%. It doesn't say necessarily senior affordable at 60%.
Yeah, so I would.
First half of the sheet that we have here, go ahead.
Yeah, so just to clarify this proposal, it takes an existing senior housing preference and extends it to all forms of affordable.
Oh, great, okay.
Yeah, so this is not
Fine.
for senior housing.
So this is actually,
50% AMI,
Great.
any kind of affordable supported housing, and 60% AMI reachable through income averaging, or 60% AMI units.
So it could be even deeper.
Yes, this income averaging means it would have deeper affordability, and a mix of deeper affordability and above 60% AMI, no higher than 100% AMI, in order to create deeper affordability units.
So that would address the point that was just raised by Board Member Alfonso.
So then let me go to Board Member Sadkier and then Board Member Hampton.
Okay, so I just want, for the sake of clarification, when, and in pursuant to the issue that was raised, when they talk about affordability and income, they're not talking about people who, because their income may be lower, would be getting Section 8 or other subsidies, correct? They're just talking about flat, this is the rent.
You can use a Section 8 voucher or a city-based, it's like city tax voucher in an affordable housing unit. And in fact, HPD has sort of maximized the way to do that. So these will serve vouchers.
Understood, but I'm just saying that people who do earn less could be eligible
Yeah,
for.
no,
You don't have to have a voucher.
Sorry, but yes, if you do have a voucher, so your low individual has received a tenant-based assistance, you could also use one of these. HPD is working, or has worked very closely to make that happen, so they can maximize the opportunities for voucher holders to enter restricted units through the Housing Connect lottery.
And Board Member Hudson and then Board Member Call.
If you allow me to see if I got it right, this new zoning will allow more housing units in our neighborhoods, maybe bigger buildings, and definitely means newcomers to the neighborhood, which I have no problem with it at all. I'm just curious to know if the impact of more people on local public schools have been taken into considerations, and if our public schools will be able to accommodate newcomers within 5 years or 4 years from now, and the school will not be overcrowded. Thank you.
Great question. So these are incremental increases throughout the entire city. So every R6 Star 10 district would receive at least a 20% bump only for income restricted affordable housing. So it is true that we'll have larger buildings, but it will, slightly larger buildings that would accommodate more people. Not necessarily, I can't say if they're going to be newcomers or people from inside the neighborhood spreading out, right? It's probably going to be a mix of both. But we have done a full environmental review. We've issued a draft environmental impact statement, which identified only impacts in 3 categories and some neighborhood types. One of those impacts was on early education, on schools and daycare. And so the Department of City Planning will work with the School Construction Authority, the Department of Education, on mitigation measures for that impact throughout the environmental review process before issuing a final environmental impact statement for it.
That was done at the district level?
It's the school analysis is done at the school district level, yes.
So I see, I have board member Cohen and then I have board member Parker.
So I guess I would be curious to hear from DCP about if they've done any projections in terms of how likely developers are actually going to take advantage of this. Because my gut instinct is that most developers would say, 20% more units or, in height is not gonna, change their calculus much in terms of like if they want to, they would probably make more money doing market rate housing or what have you versus, switching to affordable for the 20% increase. But I'm curious if DCP has done any analysis or, taken input from developers in terms of if this is something that'll actually be taken advantage of.
Thanks so much for that question. We certainly have done a lot of outreach with the development industry, including affordable housing developers and private developers. One of your colleagues on the board mentioned the tax incentive 485X, the replacement for the previous tax incentive for rental housing 421A. These tax exemptions are almost universally used in rental development. It provides a 30-year tax exemption in exchange for a certain percentage of the units to be set aside to be permanently income restricted. So because 421A was almost universally used in rental developments, we expect 45X will also be used in rental developments. And this will simply allow more floor area for those income restricted affordable units, which they're creating through the tax exemption, to be located in the bump that they're receiving through UAP. So we expect that this will be widely taken up in mixed income developments. It will also obviously be taken up by HPD in projects using public subsidy, including 100% affordable projects to be bigger, and that's great. We obviously love our 100% affordable projects and want HPD to maximize their subsidy in the big buildings that the zoning allows. So, thanks.
Okay, so I'll take the last three board members. I have board member Parker, then board member Wolin, and then board member Siegel.
For clarity, this is expanding what's currently in place for senior housing, right? But the second piece says that it will also create a 20% bump for places that don't have a senior housing preference. What areas is that specific to?
Color already has a senior housing preference, and it'll simply take that senior housing preference and make it available to all forms of affordable supported housing. In these very limited darker orange colors, they're pretty rare in your districts, but in some areas they're more common. Those districts have no preference for senior housing. And so those districts would get a 20% bump for all forms of affordable and supportive housing, obviously including senior housing. Those are often like B districts, like R6B, those would be getting the new 20% bumps.
Okay, and so the last two board members, I have board member Wolin, and then I have board member Siegel.
I'd like to point out that so far of all the things we've looked at, this is the first and only one that actually addresses affordability. And we have from the 2009 rezoning allowed for a certain amount of upzoning. Coney Island Avenue is one example, Ocean Avenue is another example. Will tell you, and developers, when they can add an extra couple of floors by mixing in affordability, make more money. Because the basic expenses of buying the land, knocking it down, hiring the architects, or all that's covered under the existing zoning, in R6, for example. So now instead of 6-story, they can go to 8-story and add more units and make money. And they're taking advantage of this all over the city. Okay, the problem is only that there are sometimes they have 60 units and there's 60,000 people applying for them. It's just not enough. I happen to think this is a reasonable proposal and is a good idea. And if it was all that we had to worry about in terms of our area, that the areas we agreed for upzoning now will go a couple of floors higher, perfect. It isn't. There's more going on than just that, but for this particular initiative, I think it's reasonable for us to consider.
Okay, so we are at time, but I will allow board member Siegel the last
I'll
word.
be quick. I just want to point out that, I expect there to be a large proportion of us that are going to vote in favor of this. And as a sign that we do support affordable housing and we do support reasonable development. And in our neighborhood, on Coney Island Avenue, Cortellia Road, Ocean Avenue, we do support that, okay? So I just want to be clear about that.
Okay, and so given that discussion, Do I have a motion on the table for the universal affordability preference? Board Member Denise?
I would motion to approve with conditions, specifically in the conditions, I would like, I know this isn't directly about zoning, but to ask, for people to look into an expansion of vouchers, city cups vouchers, so that more people who are even lower income can have better access to all of the units in these places. And also would note that when possible, our district would like a mix that includes deeper affordability.
Thank you for sharing that motion.
And friendly to amendments if people have them.
So is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, so now that we have a second, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, any abstentions? Any ineligible? Okay, give me a second real quick. Okay, so the motion carries. Okay, and so the next item up is convert non-residential buildings to housing. Before I start the timer on this, we do have, there's two things. And so we have a question from the public. So I will take that question. And then also to let folks know, after I take that question from the public, if any of the people who had signed up to testify today, if you have any testimony, concerning this piece, then this would be your time to come up here. And I'd give you 2 minutes. Okay. And so I believe there was a question from the public. Yes.
Oh, hi. I guess I walked in a little bit late. I apologize. But I was just wondering, with respect to two things which are kind of general. With respect to the universal affordability preference, I was wondering if you had thought about the impact of the increase, not just in terms of thinking about how much a building could go up on a vacant lot, but for an existing smaller building, whether it might push some of those buildings over to the point that they could be demolished. We're definitely seeing that further north on Flatbush Avenue, where many of the buildings are already underbuilt to the 7-8 zoning, and they're not underbuilt enough today for them to be demolished if they have, a profitable commercial business. But with the increases, potentially, you could see them being demolished, and we're definitely seeing smaller buildings being demolished. So I was just wondering if you
Since we just voted on that.
thought about the additional impact of that. And then the second thing is, with respect to the dwelling unit factor, I don't know if you're gonna go over that, but that would impact both low density housing and high density housing, because I think most of this district is in the inner transit zone. So that would entirely remove the dwelling unit factor, which today controls how many units you can have based on the size of the building. But without the dwelling unit factor, buildings could become all studios. So for example, a very large house.
That is time if you wrap up.
Yeah, single family zone could become, like 10 studios.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So first thing, thank you very much for sharing those questions. And so I'll start backwards. And so regarding the dwelling units, that was an item that the board, we had ratified in our prior meeting, but this is still a very valid question and concern. And so what I would say is we have this recorded and we also have 2 representatives from DCP. So
Only units is also coming
It's
from
gonna-
item 8.
Oh,
Item
okay.
8.
Excellent. And actually, we're bringing that up in item 8, my apologies. And so then the other thing too, regarding the university affordability preference, that is an item that I believe we had just come to a recommendation on that when you walked in, but at the same time, this is a very long and, iterative process, right? And so what I would say for your question about that is you have these 2 representatives from DCP that if you're able to stay the whole time, you can ask them that too. And then on top of that, on July 10th, there will be a DCP hearing, and it will be at their office at 120 Broadway. And so if you are able to attend that, then that can be another avenue through which you can raise your concern and questions about that specific piece of the potential impacts of the university, of the universal affordability practice as well. So thank you very much for sharing your, your thoughts and your analysis and concerns and, opportunities with this too. I appreciate that. So, yeah. So we will now begin the time for the convert non-residential buildings to housing. I will put 10 minutes on the timer, so give me a second for that. And I see Board Member Wolin, so I will recognize you first.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, I'd like clarification on this item. Because does this mean that any commercial vehicle, regardless of its current zoning, automatically becomes a residential zoning? And how does this conversion work? Doesn't tell us anything.
This only applies in districts where residential uses are already allowed. So it doesn't apply in manufacturing districts or C8 districts where residential uses are not allowed. Nothing in this text amendment affects M districts or C8 districts. This only would give, so there are existing rules, adaptive reuse rules in Article 1, Chapter 5 for a zoning resolution that allow non-residential buildings to convert into housing. So those apply generally in Manhattan and central parts of Brooklyn and Queens. This would just extend those existing Article 1, Chapter 5 rules to the entire city and to buildings that were built more recently.
Thank you. Okay, so I see Board Member Cohen and then Board Member Denise.
So I'd say I think this is one of the most well-founded proposals that is out there. I think with the conversion to work from home, there's a lot of vacancy in office buildings around New York City. There's a lot less demand for office space, and there's a lot of demand for housing. So however we can encourage, office building owners to make these conversions and make it financially viable. I know there's a lot of issues with that. But I think that'll, that is a really great way and a lot of space to, take advantage of to use housing. And I don't think it's going to be something that will necessarily feel, in CB14. But if Manhattan, if Midtown, if Wall Street, if it's going on there, that'll relieve the housing crunch to some degree here. So I think it's something we should support.
Okay, so I see Board Member Denise and then Board Member Parker.
Yeah, I echo Board Member Cohen's comments and just want to note that, I think especially like one of the reasons that our district has felt a lot of the push of building more housing is because there hasn't been as much opportunity in other areas potentially, especially places that are even closer to the core job center, and this would be a great opportunity for that. One question I had for DCP was just, I support this and I hope we can approve it for these reasons, but I also I understand that like 1991 is probably so that you can't like build a giant commercial building today and then, sorry, I didn't mean to skip you. Build a giant commercial building today and then just immediately convert it to housing. Like that would be very disingenuous. And I totally agree with that. Is there any way that like to consider this as like a rolling basis of some number of years? Because, I would hate to have to every, 30 or so years catch up with if this were to change.
Yeah, so the decision to place the year at 1991 is based on what you said, that, we obviously in some year, because otherwise you can answer this one-step, two-step problem in which people could immediately convert. But also it is important to retain New York City's commercial space. Our stock of office space is vital to our local economy. So for example, office centers, including those built recently, like at Hudson Yards, we do want to make sure that those remain vital commercial centers. And so that's why the 1991 date is recommended. This was worked in a large interagency and stakeholder working group on office adaptive reuse, an office adaptive reuse task force, which arrived at that 1991 recommendation. So this is based on that outreach.
Thank you.
Good. So I saw Board Member Parker. I believe you had your hand up.
Yep. Question around parameters for this. So in a building that currently has office space, what would convert into residential parameters be like? Is this going to be mixed use spaces now, or like the entire like building, if it's office space, we'll have to convert it to residential, like what does that look like?
I think in examples and, that have used these rules to convert, have often, maintained the commercial ground floor, mixed use building, while being primarily residential. There aren't, I think, requirements per se about, that continue to happen in some areas. These might be used in, residential districts in which they would only convert to residential building. These rules exist now in the office centers, so there's obviously demand for commercial space as well as residential space. But this is a citywide proposal, so I do want to emphasize that it could apply in this district. For example, if there was, a former religious building, a former private school that maybe is closed and it's interested in converting, that would, be able to convert using these rules as well. But if that's in a residential district, it would not convert to a mixed use building, it would convert to a residential.
Okay, so I see District Manager Campbell, then Board Member Minnick.
You just caught my ear with stakeholder working group, and I'm glad you had those. I would hope that you could include members of the public in upcoming stakeholder working groups, because you would have fomented the buy-in instead of like dropping down a fully realized plan and asking for reaction. You could have gotten really quality ground level input. But I'm glad you had at least a partial stakeholder working group. So thanks for that information.
And Board Member Minnick, then Board Member Soccer.
Yeah, I just really wanted to express my support for this. I think this is again, like one of the best pieces yet, and I think it's something that we really should support. Just given there are a lot of really great projects that are out there that have been able to happen because of exactly this kind of conversion of buildings. Everything from supporting housing sites to luxury buildings at this point. Like Rhodes Watchtower and Domino Sugar Factory, something like that. And who knows what's gonna happen.
Caledonian Hospital, right?
There's a lot. Yeah, so I think this really is something that should start for support.
Thank you very much. So Board Member Prasad.
To DCP, shared housing with common amenities, was that the reference someone made earlier, thinking of it as an SRO?
I believe so, and I think that's gonna be a separate voting item, right?
Yes.
That's a voting item.
Yes.
It will be possible to just to get to this voting item. Conversions right now, conversions are only allowed to Class A apartments. Conversions under this proposal would also be allowed to supported housing, shared housing, or dorms. As Bill mentioned, converting is sometimes infeasible to Class A apartments. Offices have large floor plates, they're not conducive to, a setup of a traditional apartment, but it could work quite well for some other housing models, including shared housing, in which there are common facilities and bedrooms on the private bedrooms.
Okay, in general, I agree with Steve, totally for the concept. Again, financially, everything I've read implies that the infrastructure cost, et cetera, is extremely prohibitive. And also, the wear and tear on the infrastructure, it's not the same as having full residents in a full residential building versus commercial, tenants who are just there on and off, especially after COVID. But in general, I think it's a great idea. And I know that the dorm aspect, it's always been a problem. I used to be in Lower East Side housing, and NYU would come in and build fake dorms and then try to convert it to residential. So I like that this sort of streamlines, the procedures for that. We won't feel quite so cheated.
And if I could just add one thing about the financial feasibility element, how people have brought up, the state has passed a tax incentive to promote these conversions. And that tax incentive would also require a portion of the units converted using the tax incentive to be restricted. It's of course true that not every possible commercial building will be a feasible conversion site, but using that tax incentive and also the zoning rules, we do think really some important projects viable.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So seeing no other board members' hands up, do I have a motion on the Board Member Woolen?
I move that we accept it as written.
Second.
Okay, so all those in favor, please raise their hands.
Even government not to abstain.
Yeah, but just to be thorough, any opposed? So any ineligible, Any abstentions? Okay, so the motion carried. So what I will do is I will break things up just a little bit. We do have some people who did sign up for, to speak when they came in. And so I will call two people and each get 2 minutes. So the first one will be Kirsty, Trutia. And then after that, it will be Lindsay Lamb, and just come up here and you get 2 minutes, please.
May I speak from here? One, two things.
Okay.
Going to speak about previous things. Here, I'll come up. Here's-
Yeah.
Do we pick it up if it's in the back as well on the blackboard?
Sometimes some people can project as well, so you
Yeah.
All right. then.
Time's up.
Nice to see you. Hi, I just want to say that, it's been wonderful to witness the process of Community Board 14. Just got involved really in May. I am concerned, I just want to echo what someone said at the general meeting. This is a city of neighborhoods. And that the whole planning process for City of Yes has not been a city of neighborhoods process. And that really I'm commenting on process, so I guess that covers all the topics. City of Yes should be a city of neighborhoods, it should not be citywide generic, it should be community-based. And a reminder that the 2009 Flatbush rezoning, which has been discussed here many times, should be the template for future planning. And it's wonderful how with that framework, you can upzone our corridors a little more, a little more affordable housing. And I say, if I live in an R2 district and I'm 2 blocks from an R7, that's my neighborhood. You can put the little housing in the R7 and preserve the R2. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so next up, we have Lindsay Lamb.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Lindsay Lamb, and I am on the Prospect Park South Association. And I want to echo I'm gonna have to describe you by what you're wearing because I couldn't hear your name, but the yellow shirt, I think she said it really well. And then the last speaker, that we are a city of neighborhoods, and to clump us all together, as New York doesn't always make sense, but I do think in terms of Victorian Flatbush, I will echo what my neighbor put on Church Avenue, which is welcome to Flatbush, and that we shouldn't be treated differently as a historic district versus a non-historic district, because it will, if you put a very tall building on Beverly, it will overshadow the historic district and it won't make it feel cohesive. And then on that note, I'm probably going to shoot myself in the foot, but it said that we can sell our air rights as a landmark building, and CPF is all landmarks. But if we were to sell it, I don't think we're keeping the integrity of the entire neighborhood. And so I'm not sure that that type of regulation makes sense in our neighborhood. That's it.
Thank you, Lindsay. All right, and so next up, we have small and shared housing. And so, can you move this? Yes, thank you so much. So we are going to be discussing small and shared housing. I will allot 10 minutes for this item. And so do I have any board members who wish to start? So I'll go board member Hatem and then board member Denise. Yes.
Okay. I would like to more clarification of what is meant by small and shared houses. Does it apply to private owners renting individually rooms within their own private homes, or does it apply to new developed units that will have individual rooms rented to individuals and then shared facilities? What does it mean by shared facility? They mean sharing the bathroom, sharing the kitchen? How this gonna work? And if I rent a room right now in these newly developed houses or buildings to an individual, the second day they have 2-3 people living with them in the same room. How are we gonna regulate that? Share the kitchen. Who's gonna clean that kitchen if they are all different people living in one unit, each one renting one room. I would appreciate more clarification. Is it one individual room rented? Is it like 3, 4 studios in one area? Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member. Sorry.
Yeah, great question. I'm going to provide, an overview of these proposals. These are actually really 2 proposals. So I'm going to start with the small housing proposal and then go to the shared housing proposal. They are one voting item in the worksheet, but you're welcome to provide feedback on, each other about. So the small housing proposal in this text amendment is to reduce or eliminate the dwelling unit factor. The dwelling unit factor in zoning is a measure of the minimum average unit size in a building. It's not a measure of the absolute minimum size of any given unit. That is regulated by the building code and the housing maintenance code. The dwelling unit factor, which is 680 in the high density districts and larger in some of the low density districts, but varies somewhat arbitrarily, is a measure of the minimum average unit size across your entire buildable floor area. So this would remove that redundant, we think, rule in the transit zone, the areas with the best access to transit, and would reduce it to 500 in areas outside of the transit zone. All of those rules about the minimum size of any given unit, including rules about having windows in bedrooms or how large a room has to be, would remain in place. Those are in building code and housing maintenance code. So that's the small proposals. Oh, and to answer one specific element of your question, these rules by dwelling unit factor apply to both new buildings and alterations. So next I'll move on to the shared housing element. So shared housing is a model of housing that would include private bedrooms, lockable bedrooms, and shared common facilities like kitchens and bathrooms. Currently, that's not allowed. There's no clear pathway to build that kind of housing today in New York City. So this would get the zoning out of the way by creating some clear definitions about what is a rooming unit, what is shared housing, so that this could be built under zoning. But most of the barriers to actually realizing shared housing are outside of zoning. They're in the housing maintenance code, the building code, and other laws. That's why HPD, the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, has been developing a shared housing roadmap, which is a comprehensive plan for the other kinds of code changes that are needed to legalize shared housing. They'll be releasing that shared housing roadmap later this summer, and that will include recommendations to other codes that would make shared housing workable. It would also include information about things like the operation of shared housing. So you asked about, who maintains the common space. I think the answer is that varies, perhaps development to development, that's something, but that's something, the type of issue that HPD is working closely on and could answer your questions on in more detail. So I'm happy to refer you to HPD about those shared housing questions, but that's the basic overview of the purposes.
Thank you very much for that. So I have Board Member Denise, then Board Member Cohen, then Board Member Bullen.
So when I moved to New York City, became an adult, I would just say that I had a really hard time finding housing that I could live in by myself. And I had ended up taking the route of becoming rent burdened, almost very rent burdened in my first few years here. And because there weren't opportunities like this, I know a lot of other people I know have taken the route of renting 2, 3 bedroom apartments with 3, 4, 5 roommates. And, I think that that's really, and now as I'm older and working on starting a family, I feel that crunch and I see my friends and family who are older feeling that crunch and not finding those larger units. I think that this is a great opportunity to make it easier for people who maybe want to live alone or can't afford larger places to be able to have a space without encroaching on family size units. Which I know has been something that every housing thing we've heard, either City of Yes, but also various ULURPs, people have always asked for larger homes in our district. And I think that this, it seems a little counterintuitive but things like this would really help allow people to get, to find something that suits themselves a little easier, not having to meet roommates on Craigslist. I know that works out really well for some people, but that can be a little scary, especially if you're moving to a new neighborhood or a new place or just starting a new job. So I think that this would be a great way to work on that and make sure that we can retain and reclaim a lot of those family size units for families who need them.
Thank you. So I have Board Member Cohen, then Bullen, then Prasad.
Yeah, so I recall like when I graduated college and started like an entry level position that basically, I knew a lot of people who were starting entry level positions in the city. A lot of cases moved out of town, just graduated from college, and they were basically living in like illegal, types of, shared facilities like this, and it was fairly common among my friend group in order to be able to afford to live in a place and relatively nearby, have a reasonable commute, and to be able to afford rent and what you can do on the entry level salary at the time. So I do think there's some appeal here. I just wanted to get some clarity in terms of implications for our community district, like how widespread would this would this basically be like all available to all buildings, or is there some limitation in terms of the zoning? I didn't quite understand that. So if DCP could clarify the implications for our district with this proposal.
Yeah, so the small element of this, they're removing the dwelling unit factor, removing or reducing the dwelling unit factor. It will be removed within the transit zone. So I don't know if you want to speak to where the transit zone is today, or if you guys have a map from the presentation.
Is it the same transit zone as the
It's
transit
the
oriented
same.
development?
No, it's the inner transit zone, which is today's transit zone. So if you guys are familiar with where the transit zone is today, that's where it will be removed. Yeah, it's also unsolicited, but and then if outside of the transit zone, which will now be called the inner transit zone, because we also have this extension of the transit zone we're proposing. Everywhere outside of the inner transit zone, it'll be, the dwelling unit factor will be reduced to 500. For the shared housing proposal, that will apply anywhere multifamily housing is allowed. Shared housing would be allowed.
Thank you. And so I have board member Wolin and then board member Person.
So you just said we're shared housing. So if someone has a COO for a one-family house, then this is not applicable?
If they're in a one family or two family district. If they're in a multifamily district, that is anywhere multifamily housing is allowed, shared housing is also allowed under this purpose.
So in an R1, 2, or 3,
It
would not be allowed.
Exactly, it would not be allowed in a one family district.
Nevertheless, my concern, the new construction, I like this idea a lot. But what we have experienced in the past is when houses become SROs, single room occupancy, they're not built to handle the electrical load in particular, so they become fire hazards. A lot of people don't want to use the common kitchen, so they bring in a hot plate, or they happen to be in a room that's a little bit cooler than the others, and they bring in a heater. And so that aspect of this, I'm very concerned about. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I have board member Person and then board member Bennett.
One of the mantras of our board in particular tends to be hated when one agency devolves responsibility for a major chunk of the ramifications of their decision to another agency. So I'm just terrified of here, the devil's in the details. And you're saying HPD is not going to have that all sorted out until later in the summer. We have to vote now.
Well, HPD has been working on this for, an extended period of time alongside this proposal. The shared housing roadmap will be made public later this summer, yes. But they've been, I just wouldn't say we're necessarily devolving our responsibility onto them. They have been an equal partner in the development of this proposal.
Okay.
But I understand your concern.
Yeah, personally, there's no way I could vote for this at this point, not knowing those kind of details. Just saying.
Happy to connect you with HPD as well.
For future, yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you. And so I'll take board member Bennett, board member Ready to lead the last one. Anyway.
Yeah, I just have some questions still, and I apologize if I just have not understood or have not heard everything that you mentioned, but I mean, so to me, like shared housing is just roommates, which I agree. I think that we do need that kind of housing for sure. But my recollection, honestly, is I don't know if this is all new housing to be made, or if the idea is that we will do this with housing and properties that currently exist. And and I'm just thinking of like my first 2 years living in New York. Years ago at this point, like a decade and a half, we're in Crown Heights and just renting an entire house with 6 housemates because that was what we had, and it was fantastic. It was like it was a social justice housing co-op is what we created, but it was great because it was not carved up I go back to that neighborhood and I don't recognize it now because all of these properties have been carved up. And I'm wondering if that's something that I'm envisioning is all the houses and part of what we have in this district and just seeing them carved up into apartments. I'm wondering if that's what would be happening, to be carved up into apartments for shared housing and for roommates. Yeah, I see that in other neighborhoods.
I'm gonna respond to.
And sorry, can I just ask, the one other thing, who would be responsible for overseeing all this? Would it be us? Would it be an agency? Is that there's a lot that I don't know.
Yeah. So in terms of, I think the conversion of existing room dwelling units into rooming units, for example, HPD has found that purpose-built new construction shared housing is often what's a cost-effective path. That converting a dwelling unit to a rooming unit is often not, a financially feasible thing to do. It is theoretically possible under this proposal. HPD is exploring possible checks on that process, including HPD approval for conversion of dwelling units to rooming units, again, as part of the shared housing roadmap. The relevant enforcement agencies would be the same enforcement agencies that are in place today, like HPD and DOB, but I will defer to HPD to speak more to the plan for enforcement of those. Yeah.
Unfortunately, no, I said board member Bennett would be the last individual. And so that brings us to time on this item. And so
Just a point of clarification, if I might.
What is it, board member?
Just a point of clarification.
Okay, I'll allow it.
The difference between when I was young and shared a house, or when Steve was young and shared a house, and with this proposal, is we knew the people we were sharing the house with, or apartment, or whatever it was. This proposal sets up a situation where it can be various groups of strangers sharing the property, which makes it substantially different. Just for your consideration as to whether you think this is a good idea or not. Thank you.
Thank you, board member. And so, given the discussion we've had on small and shared housing, do I have a motion on the floor?
Motion to approve with the condition that existing dwellings in existing non-multifamily homes, like should they be in a multifamily district that would be allowed to change, would have to go through some sort of approval, perhaps BSA, to potentially be split up.
Could you say that again, please?
Motion to approve, but if there is a current single-family home, with my understanding is that if it's in a multifamily area, it would be allowed to go through this process. Just think that that should take a little extra process to go through to be converted into a shared or small housing.
So if I understand your proposal.
Can I try to boil it down? Yeah,
Conversions would require public process.
or existing conversions, but only for single-family homes within a multifamily district.
Single-family home conversions would require public process.
Yeah.
Can I ask for a discussion point?
What is the point?
On the motion?
I think they're allowed to convert if they're in a multifamily district. I don't.
I hear the concern about conversions. I guess part of me is more concerned about new development, that developers will say, oh, I can build more units because now I can build units that don't have kitchens and they're shared. So there might be an incentive now for the new developments to be too geared in this direction compared to what the market wants. So I don't know, I haven't thought of it yet, but I feel like maybe there should be some condition on the new development as well, in addition to the conversions. That's all.
I'm also friendly to removing the condition I had stated in favor of others that people might have.
Okay.
So is the condition for public process for all
Conversion.
small and shared.
Just a point of order, shouldn't we be voting on whether it's approved or not? And if it is approved, then maybe we'll discuss conditions. But as of now, who knows if it's going to be approved?
No, the motion could include a condition. It's approved upon the condition or not approved unless a condition is met. Is
You could
valid.
take that a step further, that if it's voted down, then a new motion could be made.
Yeah, correct. And so,
There's
because
a motion on the floor.
exactly, right now we have a motion on the floor. And just to recap. The motion.
Not second.
Exactly, but I'm just recapping the motion for folks, right? So right now we have motion on the floor, and the motion is to approve with the condition that current single-family homes in multifamily home districts, those desired conversions would go through some sort of process. Right, so that's the motion that we have on the floor. So do I have a second for that motion?
Was there a consideration that Mr. Cohen's suggestion was a friendly amendment to the condition on the floor?
That's a good point. I didn't consider that. Board Member Cohen, the discussion point you raised, were you thinking of that as an amendment to the motion that Board Member Denise had raised, or as a separate?
I would be amenable to that. I was just stating my concern. That, you know, just looking at this, I'm more concerned about the new development rather than the conversions. But if we want to, I'm fine with doing a public process for conversions as well as new proposals. Okay, that seems reasonable to me.
Okay, gotcha. And then.
Sorry to be a little difficult, but
No, please.
as a point of order, since nobody seconded according to Robert's rules.
But this was a friendly amendment, so it was allowed.
Yeah, and +2, and so yes, that's true, like there wasn't a second, and +2, because that was confirmed as a friendly amendment, then I'm gonna repeat the motion, but I'm gonna include that second point, and then it's gonna be a question of, yes, do I have a second, right? So thank you very much, Board Member. And so, Board Member Cohen, could you repeat your point again, and then I'll repeat the motion with both those things.
So, motion to approve with the condition that there be a public process with regard to conversions along the lines that Board Member Denny's stated, as well as with regard to new development of involving shared kitchens or other common facilities.
Got it. So let me read this and let me confirm if I have this. So I have a motion on the floor to approve small and shared housing with the condition that point number 1, current single-family homes and multifamily districts would go through an established process in addition to new development that involves shared kitchen, the building.
Small and shared.
Small and shared housing, right? So, okay, and so do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, so then.
Second.
My motion.
Oh,
Yeah.
Tina said.
Okay, so given the motion that's on the floor, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Let's see.
4.
Yeah, 4. So. All those opposed? Okay, do I have any abstentions? And do I have any ineligible to vote? Okay, so that motion does not carry.
I'll try another motion. Motion to approve, subject to the conditions already stated and subject to a condition. I don't know how we're gonna phrase this because in the end, it probably won't be too effectual, but to the point that we have not heard anything about the underlying codes that will support this particular this particular initiative, including building codes, including the HPD roadmap, to guide us. So
Subject to acceptable HPD codes.
okay. I
Again?
accept.
I say that again.
Just as a clarification, Greg.
Yeah.
What is an acceptable code and how are we retroactive?
Yeah, I'm sort of, you know what, I'm gonna withdraw, I'm gonna withdraw. I'm gonna withdraw the motion.
A motion to not approve until such.
I'll let someone else try.
So then, Board Member Seaver.
I'd say make a motion to disapprove absent, the HPD and DOB guidelines.
I second that one.
did that job.
Disapprove.
Because we have no HPD and DOE guidelines.
Disapproved on the absence of acceptable HPD and DOP codes.
Goodness of any.
So Board Member Siegel, just to restate, your motion is to disapprove this recommendation based on the absence of HPD and
DOB.
guidelines, or?
Correct.
Okay. And do I have a second for that motion? Okay, so all those in favor of that motion, please raise your hand.
I thought that was assumed.
I'm wrong.
Got it?
Excuse me, I have a question.
We're in the middle of a vote. Finish the vote, then the question.
Yes, so then all those against? And then any abstentions?
Who knows?
And then any ineligible to vote? Okay, so the motion to disapprove does carry. So Board Member, you have a question? Yes?
I have a comment and a question. On the face of it, I think, given all of the concerns about housing and affordability, we would be in favor of small housing. I think the confusion is the enforcement of some of the regulations or the lack of clarity about those enforcements. But I hate to vote against something that is absolutely needed in the city, and small housing is needed. I mean, we talk about kitchens, of course, kitchens are important, but what's important is that people have a space. You know, they are, micro units, they can't work. So I'm just not clear. We've had so many, motions and changes and friendly amendments that I think the spirit of this is getting lost.
I think that can be articulated.
Yeah, I would say that as well, and this doesn't necessarily end the process here. It doesn't have to be a proposal that's approved at this time. It could be proposed at another time when those supporting regulations are in place, and I think you're right, there probably is generally a sentiment in support of that. It's just based on this procedural position we find ourselves, it makes it very difficult, I think.
Just to point out a fact that you're up against in this district, we have one of the highest serious housing code violation accumulations per 1,000 units of housing than only one other district in Brooklyn, and we're maybe fourth citywide. So it's hard to put up faith and stock in HBD without seeing, and then given their track record here. So maybe those guidelines will be in place before your vote in the summer and people can revisit.
Yeah, there certainly are real enforcement issues in the city. I think one of the reasons we see so many enforcement issues is because of our housing shortage. People are overcrowding, people are doing illegal construction, because there aren't legal pathways to housing. But we definitely understand your concerns about enforcement. We'll obviously keep you abreast of the shared housing roadmap, and you're welcome to, reconsider at that time, or, make your opinions heard. You're also welcome to make your opinions heard about small housing proposal, separate from the shared housing proposal in your resolution or any feedback provided to the different cities. Thanks.
Can I just quick remark? I think our position here ties in with what we voted on at the last full board meeting, which is this thing has been done terribly process-wise and without regard to neighborhood. So this serves to amplify those issues.
Thank you very much for that. And so,
Sorry, can I have a point of clarity? Do we say that if we vote it down now, that when the code is presented, the codes are presented, that we will have an opportunity to vote again? But that's not true, because this is being proposed on July 8th. So this will be our only opportunity to make our voice what we decide as a board right now, correct?
yes, this is our only time up to July 8th to make our voice known as a board, as an individual. DCP is having their public hearing on July 10th, and then the City Planning Commission is voting on that basically sometime in the fall. And so outside of the community board, there is time to comment on that.
As an individual,
As
right?
a, yes, but you're absolutely correct. As a community board, like this is it. Yes, we're correct.
All right, because I'm like really confused now because it seems as if we all are basically saying the same thing and that the issue is HPD not giving us the freaking information we need in order to approve it.
Right.
So, and that came up early on when you mentioned to us that we were waiting on that, and this gentleman here, it came out quickly. So my question is, how soon can HPD share the information with us? Can it be before July 8th?
I don't have a date for when the shared housing roadmap will be released. I can only say later this summer, sorry.
All right, but clearly you can share though our concern and what's holding this up.
Yes.
Maybe we'll make them hurry up.
Don't want it.
Yeah.
We
I-
need the answer.
We definitely, HPD is a part of this community outreach process. Sorry if I should have made that more clear. They're very much part of the community outreach process, and this concern is, they're very aware that people want the shared housing roadmap. I will reiterate your concern to them tomorrow, that you guys feel you cannot vote on this without having the shared housing roadmap. I'll certainly convey that to HPD, and they're aware of this concern.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, yeah, but you feel that indicated your.
Yeah, so I'll take something from board member Khan and then we'll go to the next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I think that when you took start to move the motion about this point, that's what looked more clear and more appropriate. But when we started the process, so we have too much conditions, then motion move, not move, agreed, not agreed, as per Gail Smith sharing that too much confusion. So I think if it is better way, if you again start your first move that you took, so that will be a more convenient for us, because now there is a lot of contradiction within the. Is there any constitutionally? No. Oh.
So thank you for that feedback, though. I appreciate that. And so, yes, the thing that I can do is, with the board's help, I can definitely continue to better summarize the motions that board members put before us, right? And then work with the district manager and other people here to make sure that I summarize those better, so that people are much clearer about the things that we're deciding. So I thank you for that guidance. Yes.
And you,
I'm sorry, but I don't think you did anything wrong. This has nothing to do with what you said. This has to do with HPD. This is not, so please don't apologize. No, Chair.
No, I gotta apologize for apologizing.
See, I'll put that in the chairs.
Yeah, but this is not on you.
Yeah.
before we move on, can we clarify where we stood though? I don't think the last
Do you
one
want me to read it?
stated.
Yeah. So sure.
The,
Motion
the
carried.
motion that carried was
Yeah.
to disapprove, item 8, absent
Well, the way you said it-
HPD. Do you want,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
But I think the way you phrased it before was because it was like.
Absent.
Because of the
No, she
absence
said
of HPD and DOB guidelines.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, that was the motion that carried.
Number 9.
So now we are on to campus infill. And so I will allot us 5 minutes for this item. So give me a second. My time to-
I don't think there's anything.
Yeah, I have anything on, I'm just going through it. So I'll start the timer. And so let me start the timer, and then I will start by board member Prasad and then call.
I just asked Sean a quick question. How many of these are there in CB14? Her impression is 0. So the discussion would be on the basis of how this might affect other districts. but just to put it out there, which is why we originally, I guess, only allocated 5 minutes.
I'm pretty sure I'm right, but I'm not always right, even though I act like I am.
That's why I put it on you, Sean. Okay,
So Brooklyn College has.
Then you gotta apologize.
So first thing, so we have board member Sant, so I'm gonna see board member Cohen. I forgot your name, I apologize.
Philip, clarify some of the applicability of this proposal.
Yes.
So this proposal applies to campuses which are designed or defined as sites that are over an acre and a half or have full lot control. I'm not an expert on any of those in your district, but you probably are familiar, and you can speak to that. But this also makes contextual infill an option in other challenged sites that cannot access contextual infill rules today. So that could occur in other contexts. So for example, if you have an irregularly shaped lot that you're forced to develop a height factor building, a tall skinny building, you can't use the contextual infill option. So I just want to clarify that this element includes things beyond campuses to also to promote height limited contextual envelopes in irregular and challenge sites and in campuses, just so you're aware of what you're voting on.
Okay, thank you. So board member Cohen, and then I forgot your name. Board member Phillips, I apologize. So.
Yeah, related to Barton's question, I feel like the last time this came up before the Housing and Land Use Committee, I was a little confused. So I trust if Sean is saying that there's nothing like this in the district. I would just like some clarification, with regard to Brooklyn College. What's that?
I just turned to an ad, so.
Well,
But would DCP go ahead, that Brooklyn College is not, does the zoning still have to pertain to allowance of residential development, or would Brooklyn College be subject to this?
Is Brooklyn College zoned for residential uses?
No.
What's
I know it's not. Right.
Yeah, it's a commercial district, the residential equivalent. This would apply to community facility campuses as well. I can't speak to whether Brooklyn College, would necessarily, like site analysis, these things that are all like.
yeah, because I feel like they do have like a parking area, so I'm just like thinking through implications there.
So I stand corrected, that would be.
Yeah, they want to develop that parking lot over towards the junction, right?
Well, when they knocked down the meat market, they were doing.
So you had a point of clarification?
Oh, I just want to clarify something about parking in this infill development. Sorry, I missed your discussion of parking at the last meeting, but just in case, just to remind everyone, to remove existing parking, they would need to go to CPC, and this doesn't change non-residential parking requirements. So if Brooklyn College has non-residential parking requirements, those would remain in place. So I'm just want to, clarify they may not be able to remove that parking. And try to.
So I have board member Phillips, and then Olin, then Siegel, then Denise.
My question is somewhat addressed because the term campus is misleading, which you clarified, but I think it still needs further clarification in this because the assumption wrongly can be that it has to do with educational facility, which you have addressed is not the case. So we need to be clear about that.
So I'll give you the last word. I had said Siegel, then Olin, then Denise, and then Alvarez.
I'll try to be brief. When I came here, when I considered coming here tonight, I had in my mind what happened regarding the transit-oriented development. And that is, it occurred to me that there are districts all over the city that couldn't care less if our Victorian homes are torn down. They'll vote yes. What the hell? What do we care? It doesn't affect us. And it occurred to me, I don't want to vote on something for some other neighborhood where they didn't get to weigh in on what their concerns are. And this strikes me as something that falls, the other things we voted on tonight, it didn't seem appropriate to raise this concern. But this is just something that says to me that we shouldn't be laying this on some other neighborhood, because that's my piece. So I don't know how people with these situations, I don't know how, there's no parameters where what size building gets built on what space, I don't know what they're gonna cram into what, so there are neighborhoods that really we shouldn't be laying this on somebody else.
Thank you for that, Siegel. So I got board member Wolin, then Denise, and then I have board member Alvarez.
You said that there were spaces that could be developed other than on campuses, which could be in our district, but you were not clear as to what this change means for those spaces.
Yeah.
Use terminology that most people don't understand.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to provide a brief overview, but I'll get more in depth now. So today, if you have a building that was not built under contextual envelopes, which some of you may know as quality housing, these are zoning rules that include height limits, and they're generally zoning districts that have like a letter suffix at the end. So, but there's a contextual option in the non-contextual districts. If you have a non-contextual building, so think of, for example, a NYCHA campus, where you've got towers in the park, you are not allowed to add height limited buildings, even though you have floor area available, because you have this tall building, you're not allowed to then add a building under today's zoning, which includes height limits. So that's true in the campus context. But what I meant when I said this applies to other contexts is that also applies if you have a different site, a smaller site, it's not a campus, and you can't add, if you have a high factor building or other, non-compliant building that wasn't built under quality housing, it was built before the 1961 zoning even, for example, you then would not be able to add that quality house, that contextual building. Even though there's a clear height limit, there's clear rules for what that building could be shaped like in the zoning, you're simply not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to mix. Also, if you have an irregular site, so for example, if someone, this has happened, maybe more in the Manhattan context, but it's happened, I'm thinking there's an example in Sheepshead Bay, for example, people sort of gerrymander these irregular zoning lots to have floor area, but they have no option to create a contextual building. They can't use the height limited contextual envelope. They can only use height factor zoning if they have that irregular shape site. And so as I mentioned, height factor zoning, it was designed for like tower in the park development. But when you have this irregularly shaped lot and you're building this, under these height factor rules, what you get is a radically out of context building. And the zoning gives them no option to do anything other than that out of context building on an irregular lot. And so we just want to give them the option to use the underlying contextual rules, which include clear height limits for every R6 or R10 district.
That's great. So you're effectively lowering the possibility of height.
Yeah, right now, if you're in a non-contextual district and you have, one of those irregular sites, for example, you're, the sky's the limit. There aren't height limits in the non-contextual districts when you're using height factor zoning. This is allowing them to use the contextual envelope, so there is a clear height limit. This is making height limits more broadly available and effective around the campus.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there another page for this?
Because there's another view that I think you can visualize a little bit better. Is that it?
Yeah.
Try one more. Try one more.
That's it. That's it, because we.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I got board member Denise and then Alvarez, and then you have to come to a motion. So board member Denise.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that I think that we should in fact opine on things that are not on our district, because if we don't opine on them and other community boards suggest that all housing should, as an extreme example, be pushed to districts like ours, we're not going to be seeing that more housing in every neighborhood, which is the way we get to like a more fair, more equitable New York City than the ones where maybe districts like ours have actually produced a lot more housing than ones closer into Manhattan and closer to more jobs. So I think that it is useful for us to do so, but especially when there's something like this that is trying to increase contextualization, and find housing within that, it seems kind of like a no-brainer, that these, in general, I think a lot of block side scene from the many examples, it looks more normal to me to have more housing and provides more homes. So, just noting that if other places don't build, places that do will be, more affected by that lack of housing, because as much as our neighborhood is, I love my specific neighborhood. I think it's very special. I think I love our district. I think everyone in this room shares this. It is a factor. Housing is still a regional issue where people are getting pushed from one neighborhood to another. And I'm so glad that we have all the new neighbors we have here. But, I want to be mindful that people in other neighborhoods that are getting pushed out here aren't necessarily being pushed, to their own, on their own volition. And we need to try to protect housing for them as well.
Thank you for that. And so, board member Alvarez.
I was just gonna say, there was, oh, here it is. No, I find it. The other example, I'm just thinking of like church campuses, I don't know if we have any church campuses in the district that are 1.5 acres.
I was thinking of the church on Beverly,
Maybe.
but it's not contiguous.
Yeah, so it looks, and no one can see this, but next to the church, there's like a parking lot. And then there you could build like a contextual building that's sort of, like, remember that he said, I mean, it kind of fits in and can spread it out. That's the whole idea of quality housing. But that's kind of the purpose of it. And in some ways, it could be applicable in our district. I'm just not necessarily aware of a specific example, but there may be a few out there.
Okay, thank you for that. And so, given the conversation that we had, do I have a motion on the floor regarding the campus infill?
Motion, are you pointing me here? Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Motion to approve and just to note that, we want to ensure, even though that this doesn't, may not affect our district, we think it's important that other districts are also contributing to, creating new homes, as housing is a regional issue that also affects us.
Approve it, approve it, or not approve.
I mean, we can approve it, just like, I'm happy to have it be either an approval or approval. I don't think it's a condition. I just think we should explicitly state that that's one of our. Sorry.
Okay, thank you for sharing that motion. And so, do I have a second on the floor for that motion?
Can we clarify if it's just a straight motion to approve or a motion with condition?
I would call it a motion to approve with just some text noting that this is a great way to ensure that to create opportunity, even though it might not affect our district much, it's important that we create opportunities for more housing throughout the city because it will affect our district if housing is not created.
Thank you.
That's not a condition,
So-
that's a statement.
So it is a motion to approve, right? Just a
motion.
So
Yeah,
all
motion.
four can second it.
So motion to straight approve. And has a motion been seconded?
I've seconded.
Okay, so all those in favor?
1, 2.
High five.
That's 6.
Yes. All right, so then, those who are not in favor, please raise your hands.
10.
Okay. And then any abstaining? Okay, any ineligible to vote? So the motion to approve does not carry. And so I saw board member Seaton.
My motion is to disapprove because of the lack of meaningful dialogue with affected neighborhoods.
I'll second.
Can you state that condition, the motion again?
I think I can, but I promise.
Go ahead.
To motion to disapprove because of the lack of meaningful dialogue with affected neighborhoods.
Can I propose an amendment?
Sure.
So I think I hear that we think this is mostly outside of our district, so we don't want to weigh in. But how about we also have as a condition, to the extent this does turn out to be applicable, that there be a public comment process so we could weigh in to the extent there's any campus that actually impacts us. Just because, we haven't heard any testimony from anyone in this situation. So we have, to Joel's point, unlike some of these other issues where we hear from a lot of people who are affected, we might not be aware of, the situation on campuses to the extent any exist in our district. So that would be my proposal.
Motion to not approve unless there's a public input process.
Point of clarification, is it possible for us to just not give a response? Because it sounds, I guess I'm just thinking of a possibility where every board that would be affected by this and knows they are is in favor of it. And then we say to disapprove. That's kind of weird because we're not really deferring to them. So just an idea of, is there a way to have neither an approval nor disapproval if we're, if we're trying to not opine?
Sure. So, we do have a precedent for that.
And stating the deference to other.
Yeah, we do have a precedence for that where, I thought it was it the city of, yes, economic opportunity?
COIE, yeah.
Yeah, I think we did do something like that for economic opportunity where for the items that were not CB14 specific, there was something to the effect of we neither affirm nor deny, like support. So we do have a precedent for that.
But there is a motion on the table.
And I think the motion was seconded.
Sure, I just wanted to give that as a
Yeah.
possible alternative if this motion does not.
That's very true, yes, in case, depending the outcome of this, yes, we do have precedence for that. And so we have a motion that's on the floor, and there was also an amendment that was added. Sean, you had
I
said.
think the motion on the floor is the friendly amendment to the motion to not approve because of lack of public input, unless there is a public input process.
Good.
Is that acceptable?
That's fine.
And do I have a second? I think we had a second.
I thought it was already.
So then
Didn't go
now we're
through.
voting on it, and so all those in favor, please raise your hand.
What?
Not, no, I'm not.
I'm confused.
Okay,
Can we
well,
repeat?
yeah,
Please
please.
stay, please.
A motion to not approve because of the lack of meaningful dialogue with affected neighborhoods unless there is a public input process. So if somebody makes an application to build a campus info, they would have to go through a public hearing through the community board or BSA or whatever.
Okay.
And it was seconded and the vote is in process. So do you want
So is that?
to ask for a motion, ask for votes again?
Yes, I do. You want to ask for votes again? And so,
Yes, but we'll allow.
yeah, sure, no problem. Yes. So all those in favor of that motion, please raise your hand.
No, I have.
All those opposed, please raise your hand. Any abstentions? All right, anyone ineligible? Okay, so that motion does carry. Okay, and so I have two, actually, how many people do I have? Yes, I have three people who had registered to speak when they came in. Thank you for your patience. And so I'll give each of you 2 minutes. And so first person is Fred Bear.
You can speak from there,
Fred,
Fred.
yeah, you can speak from there.
Right, I just wanted to talk about the sharing. And since you already passed your motion. But I wanted to say that those of us who've been kicking around here for a long time, remember the nightmare of SROs in the city. And the city banned them for good reason. So when you're looking at this HPD roadmap, I would ask you to look at it very critically to see, make sure that we don't get back to where we were prior to the city banning the SROs, because otherwise we're gonna wind up back in the same paradigm that we were there then. That's all I want to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bear. Okay, so next speaker, we have Jeffrey Thomas. Oh, yeah, all right. So then the next person we have is Olgierd Bilano.
Okay. I was mostly curious about the landmark piece that you haven't gotten to yet. I don't really understand it, but when I looked at the zoning, it said, you know, this doesn't apply to residential and all that's crossed out. And now it says from now on, anything landmarked can transfer its air rights. So I would like to understand that better. And if it does mean that transfers, you know, there's a little bit of a death by 1,000 cuts here where the whole proposal, you know, at one point, hey, we raised the FAR 20%. And then if you do affordable, you get another 20%. And then if you buy some air rights from a landmark, you get 20%. And cumulatively, you know, everyone's thinking, oh, they said it was going to be 4 stories. And next thing you know, there's an 8-story building. So I'm not saying, you know, say no for the sake of no, but if, you know, you get sold one thing and then, you know, something much bigger gets developed. And the other thing, I just feel like, you know, since you guys are gonna vote on this whole bill, this feels like when a congressperson says, oh, I didn't know what I was voting on. They gave me, you know, 10,000 pages at 10 PM and we have to do yes or no. And then I didn't know it was full of all this awful stuff. And there's many good pieces in this that people have wanted for a long time. There are many great things, but then there's just some pretty pictures and the word affordable everywhere. And at the end of the day, this is like Texas, you know, build whatever you want to build. And as much as we kind of call it something progressive, there's actually so much we're leaving on the table where we could ask for more. It could be more affordable. It could be more requirements. And instead it's like, hey, build whatever you want, so I
Rick
think.
Alvarez read the whole thing.
And so
Sorry, is that,
But he
just
did.
last thing,
Yeah.
I wish it could be that each community board had the right to, had a mandate to come up with a certain amount of as of right, and if they failed to, this would be the fallback. Instead of this as just this citywide template that, you know, treats everyone in.
Right.
There you go.
Thank you, folks. So thank you, Mr. Villanelle. And so I believe also there's a question from the public.
I can
That was
provide a
Barley.
clarifying point around the landmark issue, or I can
Wait,
wait.
yeah, hold on, let's put that on the table till we get there, if that's all right.
Okay. Yeah, so now we are on new zoning districts. And so give me a second. Set the timer. So that will be for 5 minutes. So.
Let's try to stay to it.
Yeah.
Do we have a slide for that? I don't think we do. There's not a lot of, there weren't illustrations for this.
Yeah, so let me start, and then I have board member Warren, and then board member Alvarez.
Yeah, I'd like a little clarification on this, because as far as I know, every part of New York City is already in a district. So you have to take away from somewhere to create something new. So I'd like to understand, what is this about? Why are we doing it? What's the process? Thank you.
So as part of this proposal, thank you, as part of the proposal, if you look on the list of zoning districts that are allowed in the city, there are a certain limited list right now. And so what this proposal does is it introduces a few more options. So if there is a future rezoning, there are more different types of R6 districts, for example. And then it also introduces R11 and R12 districts, which are a response to the state, I believe, lifting some of the FAR caps. So those are now options as well within the menu of zoning districts that currently exist. But it does not by itself rezone anything. It just makes those districts available for rezoning.
Yeah, for these districts to be mapped, they would require their own zoning map, so they would, you'd see them again being mapped.
But it's not part of the city of Yes at this point, only that they would exist.
Yes, they would exist, and then in a subsequent neighborhood rezoning or in a private application, someone would have that option to pursue that zoning district, and that would require a zoning map and a full
Do
ULR.
we know what these are?
Yes.
What are you proposing?
So there are two new R6 districts, and there are the R11 and R12 districts. The two new R6 districts are aimed at filling the gap between R6B and R6A. So you probably, at this board, have, you know, there's R6A in this board, you sometimes probably see private applications for R6A. Often in R6A is in a 3.0 base FAR, which is a big jump from R6B, which is 2.0 base FAR. And so often the R6, that gap can create, you know, either zoning that's out of context or, you know, people being knocked around in the public process from R6A to R6B. We're intending to fill that gap by these two new R6 districts, which would have 2.5 space FAR, 3.0 with mandatory inclusionary housing. The R11 and R12 districts are for in excess of 15 residential FAR. So they would be 15 and 18 residential FAR, or I'm sorry, above 12 FAR, which is the previous. So they'd be 15 and 18 FAR districts. They could only be backed with mandatory inclusionary housing.
And how many stories tall are these buildings generally in an R11, 12?
In the R11 and R12 district, I would have to get back to like, could they be governed by like tower height limits, which like R10s are governed by today? And frankly, the R11s and R12s are a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. Probably that's relevant to this board. So I'll have to get back to you about the height limit rules in R11s and R12s.
So what about the R10?
R10's existing district and those height limits are only changing in the context of universal affordability.
I know, but what are they? You don't know that.
Sorry. Board member Alvarez, then, oh, sorry, Drew.
No, the R10 districts are mostly like Manhattan, like the really high density, Long Island cities, Manhattan.
And so board member Alvarez and then board member Denise.
Oh, my questions were answered. I was just.
Oh, okay, got it. Well, board member Denise, you're up.
Hi, I was gonna note that, it looks like you can see some of the height limits on the existing R10 things, that look to be, there's like a base height and then there's some amount that is on top of that. But, one thing I would just note about, and there's also just, a little contextual difference to that. One thing I would just note is that a lot of I think that where R11 and R12 districts could potentially get mapped, largely not our district. But, if you looked at current FARs of a lot of older buildings in Manhattan, they exceed the current FAR cap. And that has just got, the previous FAR cap, which has just gotten lifted, and it would make sense to potentially, again, housing a regional crisis, allowing those neighborhoods to potentially take advantage of this. Of course, they don't have to, but I don't see any harm in creating more zoning options, particularly ones that would, where they're likely to be mapped, be in line with already existing buildings that are out of compliance with current zoning. And, I think that also just in general, having more zoning options in between would allow for people to create, we keep hearing at this board that people want contextual rezonings, want to make sure that the, smaller homes aren't overshadowed by things, and just having more options that are in between, like R6 and R7A would be, or sorry, between that R6 A and R6B gap would probably help with that as well. So I see no reason not to just allow people to have more options that they can then choose at a later time through the normal process that would already have a lot of public input.
Thank you for remembering these. So I see,
That was a motion? Just kidding.
Maybe. You want?
so that concludes.
Oh, we're in discussion.
Yeah, so that concludes the discussion piece of this. And so now now Board Member Smith, we are on to the motion part of this. Yes, and so, do I have a motion on the floor regarding new zoning districts?
Sure, I'll make the
I see
motion
Board Member Wallen, yes.
that we accept it as written.
Second.
And so, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, so all those opposed? Any abstentions? And I see no when eligible. So that motion carries.
11.
All right, so now we're on to item 11, which is to update the mandatory inclusionary housing.
So we'll go direct to the explanations.
Set this timer real quick. Right. So, do I have a board member to start the discussion regarding update mandatory inclusionary housing? Alvarez.
I'll turn it over to DCP. If you just give us a quick thumbnail.
So currently there are two MIH options. There's option 1 and option 2. Option 3 is the option with like the highest current amount of affordability. It requires 30% of the units to be at an average of 40% of area.
It says 20.
Oh, sorry, 20% to be at an average of 40% of area median income. Right now, the only way to have that is to have that be one of the options, like one of the 3 options, you can have that. But what this proposal would do is that it would give, it would make it possible for that to be the only option in a land use action, in a rezoning or an area.
And is there any change to the mapping for mandatory inclusionary zoning? Or is it simply this
Where it
would-
exists.
where it exists
No,
now?
for stuff like upcoming MIH, when someone comes to apply either a neighborhood rezoning or private application, that's when this would be sought. That option would be applied. The options are applied at the time of the mapping of MIH. And so when that MIH district is mapped, there's no MIH, like mapping action being applied at this time. Yes, it would be, this would be for the future.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Bendet and then Board Member Wall.
Yeah, just a clarification from DCP, based on the map, do we even have this in our district?
No, you have MIH areas, yeah, but it wouldn't retroactively apply this to the existing MIH areas. If there's a new developed MIH, building, then it could, we now have the option to say that building can only be like an option 3 building.
Cool. Board Member Wall.
Okay, so how does this square with the one we looked at, universal affordability preference which talked about 60% average.
Yeah, so UAP is a voluntary program. It's available in every R6 to R10 district throughout the entire city. If you're in a mandatory inclusionary housing area, you cannot participate in UAP because you have, you're mandated to provide affordability, which means you have to participate in MIH. So UAP is a preferential FAR that's an option in areas where MIH is not met. So MIH only applies in these parts of the map. UAP applies in every R6 to R10 district that you saw previously. The only, interaction I will mention here is that in some cases, UAP FARs are higher than existing MIH FARs. And so we're equalizing MIH FARs with UAP FARs. So take the R6A example, the MIH FAR today for R6A is 3.6 on top of a 3.0 base. We'll bring that up to 3.9 for the MIH FAR on top of 3.0 base, but again, they'll be required to provide the same percentage of affordability, either that's existing today or that's mandated at the time of the application.
Okay, last question. What is it now that you want to lower to 40%?
It's not that it's lowering it to 40%, it's that MIH options 2 and options 1 and 2 require a higher portion of the housing, a higher portion of the floor area, 25 to 30% to be affordable, but at a higher AMI. And so today you have to either have MIH option 1 or 2 and MIH option 3. You can't only apply MIH option 3. And so it's allowing this to be applied as a standalone option. But MIH options 1 and 2 would continue to exist.
Thank you.
So I see board member Thies and then board member Alfonso.
So my understanding, just to get this right, is that if someone were to, if this were approved, if someone were to come and be like, I want to rezone my neighborhood, or I want to rezone a particular site, it would be subject to some MIH, and this would give them a new option that would, if we were to pick this preference, if it came before us, we would be saying we want the deeper affordability as the only option, basically, for this building. Cool. We don't have a lot of MIH mapped in our district yet. I think part of that is due to having, rezoned in the 2009 rezoning. But it certainly seems like, given that we've heard a lot about people wanting deeper affordability, making it so that we could say it's only this option instead of allowing a developer to pick a more expensive option or an option that creates more expensive units. Or this, it sounds like maybe my understanding is that has been chosen predominantly over this deeper affordability, and this would kind of regulate that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this is in response to asks by, electeds and housing advocates, because right now, if someone wants to ensure that rezoning with MIH will produce deeply affordable housing, they don't have a really way to do that, because you can only apply MIH option 1, option 3 along with 1 or 2, which are 60% or 80% AMI. And so then when you've applied the 2 options, that means when the developer goes to build the building, they can use either of the options. So you can't ensure that the MIH subsequent developments will be done under option 3. Under this change, you could ensure that they'll use option 3, it's their only option.
And then board member Alfonso.
I believe that you did clarify, because I'm sorry, as a new board member, I'm hearing a lot of letters and numbers. And I'm like, what is happening? Which is why I've been upsetting, because I'm like, I'm not really understanding what's going on here. Is there a way that you can briefly put it in layman's terms so that we can understand?
Yeah, okay, so MIH, mandatory inclusionary housing, requires new buildings to set aside a certain portion of the units to be MIH is only applicable in these pink districts because MIH is only applied at the time of a significant rezoning. When there's a significant increase in residential density, MIH gets mapped alongside that. There's a few different options of MIH. The ones I've been name checking, and sorry if I haven't been fully explaining them, which are the relevant ones here, options 1, 2, and 3. It's actually the 4th option, but option 1 is 25% is 30% of the floor area at 60% AMI, no, 25% of the floor area, so a quarter of the building at 60% AMI, which is about $80,000 for a family of 3. Option 2 is to have 30% of the floor area at 80% AMI, so a little bit of higher income, but more floor area. And then option 3, the one we're discussing now, is to have 20% of the building set aside at 40% AMI, so significantly lower income level, and is a little bit less of a building in order for it to be economically feasible. And so this is often known as the deep affordability option, because it's to ensure the deepest affordability. The other two are, maybe more middle income. And so this is to ensure deep affordability. One other thing I'll note for people who are maybe less familiar with mandatory inclusionary housing, or even those who are, is that almost all mandatory inclusionary housing projects use income averaging, which I explained earlier. So that means that most of them provide units at a range of incomes that average to the affordability level. So if the affordability level is 40% AMI, that means that many projects will probably provide 20% AMI, 40% AMI, and 60% AMI units, for example, to average at 40% AMI to really reach the deepest deepest level of affordability. Does that help? Yes, thanks.
Basically, you can dig a well that's really deep but really narrow, or you can dig a well that's really shallow and kind of wide, but you can't do both at the same time. And so this is the deeper, narrower well. Like fewer units are affordable, but the ones that are affordable are more affordable.
Okay, thank you for that. And so,
I like that now.
so do I have a motion on the floor regarding, excuse me, the update to MIH? Board member.
To approve.
Second.
No other comment.
As is, approve as is.
And so, all those in favor, please raise your hands. I didn't see that. Just confirm. Any opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, so then
Abstention?
abstentions ineligible, so the motion carries. So now we're on to item number 12. So the
I don't know if we had any, we don't have a
did
fact
this
on
apply
this.
to us? Board member Alvarez?
Um,
And let me.
please help me to just summarize this one. Is it basically
5 minutes.
to try to use these smaller lots that maybe are not developable? Thank you. But for these sorts of available lots that may be a little bit narrower, it removes the requirement that you have a certain lot width. And because right now, because of the lot width limitation, you get less height. But this basically removes that and allows you to have the height of the underlying district. Is that?
Yes, so sliver law is a rule, an arcane zoning rule from proto zoning, the early days of zoning, in which lots that are less than 45 feet wide are limited to either developing 100 feet tall or the width of the street, whichever is less. This is like an early height limit before zoning had height limits. As I've mentioned in earlier voting items, we used to use this regime of height factor zoning in which it was geared toward building these tall, skinny buildings which do not have height limits. So this is an early way to create height limits. But of course, zoning has evolved over time, and we now have height limits. We have contextual options in the non-contextual districts, or mandated contextual envelopes and with height limits in the contextual districts. And so what this proposal simply does is allows those sites, those sliver law sites that are less than 45 feet wide, to use their underlying height limit rather than using this sliver law, which is an attempt to regulate height, which we have a better, more clear way to do to achieve the aim of this while also creating housing opportunities on some narrow sites.
And it's applicable in which districts?
R7 to R10 districts.
So the CB14 have any, what'd you say, R7 to R10?
Maybe very.
We have some 7s on Ocean Avenue.
Okay.
And I think McDonald.
But
Yeah, let's build sliver lot, buildings on McDonald.
Yeah. And maybe Coney Island, I don't remember now what we said, Coney Island businesses, R6 or R7.
That's R7A.
R7.
7A?
Okay, so we do have some spaces where this would be.
I don't know that this is R7 or R7A. Does R7A count? I thought not.
R7s, yeah.
Just R7.
I believe it's just non-contextual or something. We actually do have a very small map over here, but
Too small to be.
yeah, too small to really help. But
But would it be safe to say on the tiny map that it's limited applicability for the district?
Extremely.
yes, a spec, if that.
Okay, so then, given that, given that information.
That was just a crumb from a snack.
Less, even less.
And so, board member Alvarez?
I'll make a motion to approve as written.
Second.
Okay, so, all those in favor, please raise your hands.
I think it's unanimous.
Yeah, I think so. Actually, I don't know.
Let's do it by, not,
Yes, yes. So, any opposed, please raise your hand. Let's see. Any abstentions? Okay, thank you.
One abstention.
Any ineligible to vote? Got it. So then, just to confirm, all those in favor, raise your hands. Got it. So that motion carries to approve the slating law. Second. Okay, so the next item is quality housing amenity changes. And I will allow 5 minutes for this.
We don't have a slide on this.
So we would love an explanation, a recap of this, please. Yes.
So today, quality housing buildings that are developing under a set of rules in the zoning known as quality housing are required to set aside 3% of their floor area for recreation space, so that the building has amenities available to the tenants. And this builds on this existing framework in the zoning and extends it to all buildings with more than 9 units, so that at least 3% of the floor area has to be amenities. Amenities include things like, shared spaces in your building, for example, laundry facilities, mail rooms, trash disposal areas, outdoor space, etc. The amenity space can also be filled by some things that you may not think of as amenity, but that promote good building outcomes. So for example, if you locate a family-sized unit, a unit with 3 or more bedrooms on the end of a corridor, that can also qualify for the amenity definition. And so this requires 3% of the floor area to be set aside for amenities, and you can exempt up to 5% of the floor area if it's being used for amenities. Again, that's in any building, 9.
Does that mean exempt?
Like the floor area will not count. That's towards the floor area.
Okay,
So the
but
floor area is exempt.
This is additional to whatever the FAR is.
You could, you just take it, like subtract whatever is used for that amenities from your total floor area, a deduction on your floor area.
So it allows for slightly bigger building.
Okay, so I see, board member Denise.
So what, is, it sounds like that potentially like exempted 5% would be making it easier to add, to make one more 1-bedroom unit in it be a 2 or 3 bedroom unit. Just like, it sounds like this would make it easier to be building larger units.
Yes, that's one of the definitions of amenity, is to include at the end of the corridor 3-bedroom unit. So it would, family-sized units.
Yes, but also, I think to your point also, because this wouldn't make the laundry room count against your FAR, the developer could now build a larger.
Yeah, they could use that FAR for the homes themselves instead of the shared spaces.
Yeah.
Okay, board member Alvarez.
Well, and just to clarify, this program already exists. The proposal here is to expand it citywide.
Yes, this is, the definition of amenity is slightly more limited currently into recreation space. But yes, this is based on an existing requirement for quality housing buildings, and it's expanding that to buildings with more than 9 units.
Thank you.
Board member Parker.
Thank you. Clarity, you said right now, the definition of amenities is just set to recreation, so this would expand the definition of what amenities are to everything you talk about, like laundry rooms and all that.
Exactly, yeah.
And is the family size unit a new thing, or is that?
That's a new, yes, it's a new definition.
And this applies to both conversions and new development.
Yes, anything with more than 9 units.
Gotcha. And so I see board member, district manager Kendall.
Does it cross-reference to other components of the zoning text amendment, such as the shared housing?
So like how would shared housing use the amenities for their shared spaces is your question? That's a good question that I would have to get back to you on.
Good question. I don't see any more questions from board members. I will take a question from the public.
So today, quality housing buildings have a slightly higher density than their non-constructible equivalents, but it's in exchange for height limits as well as these amenities. So if you're granting extra density to non-contextual, non-quality housing buildings, are you also going to be putting height limits on them?
Well, as I've mentioned several times through other proposals, we are making it easier for people to access contextual envelopes through a variety of ways. In non-contextual districts, you do have the option to develop in a contextual envelope. But I think that's sort of separate from this proposal, which just aims to promote these amenity spaces throughout any multifamily building with more than 9 units, to make sure that they include these amenity spaces as quality housing is mandated to.
So market rate towers could get denser as of right under this.
I mean, these amenity changes are applied to any building with more than 9 units. So that would be a market rate building, an affordable building. They would be required to 3% amenity space. It's obviously important for, all kinds of buildings to have these amenities, and they'd be able to exempt up to 5% of the floor area if it's used for amenities.
And that 5% is like a replacement for today's separate requirements for trash rooms and so on, because I know there's a separate requirement.
There are other requirements for things like trash rooms, I believe, which I don't think this aims to replace. It just aims to provide the amenities exemption and.
Thank you very much for that. And so, excuse me, given the conversation that we had on quality housing, do I have a motion on the floor?
Motion to approve, and just, I know it's in here, but just to note that our district has been asking for a long time for more family size units in our support.
Thank you for that. And so is your motion to approve as is?
Yeah, and just like to note that we're excited about family size units.
Motion to approve.
Gotcha. Okay,
Seconded.
and so, all those in favor? All those against? Okay, any abstentions? Any ineligible? Okay, so the motion carries. Right, so now we are on to landmark transferable development rights. And so I will allot 5 minutes for this item, and yes, the DCP provide a recap of this, please.
Sure. So this proposal, and I think a few people have commented on this already, and so I want to make sure I'm correcting some misunderstandings, I think. This proposal allows individual landmarks, that's different than just being in a historic district, an individual landmark to transfer their development rights to more receiving sites in more areas. Today, there's already a landmark TDR program that's been used extremely sparingly. The landmark TDR stands for Transfer of Development Rights. The landmark TDR program is designed to allow, the development rights to be transferred to an appropriate receiving site that can add housing, while also, providing revenue for the landmark for their maintenance requirements. Landmarks obviously usually can't, add something, use their development rights on the site because of the constraints of the landmark. So this proposal would streamline the public process for this. So it would be a certification when there are no bulk modifications on the receiving site, or an authorization of CPC if there are bulk modifications required on the receiving site. The universe of receiving sites for where you can put your development rights, where you can send them to, right now is only if you're an adjoining lot or if you're directly across a street or intersection. So that's a very limited number of sites, which is part of the reason very few people have taken this up and been able to transfer their development rights. This will introduce the ability to transfer your development rights to any other lot on your zoning block, as well as any other lot that is across the street or an intersection from the subject block. So that's more eligible receiving sites. And then it will also, right now, if you're an individual landmark within a historic district, you can't transfer your development rights. Even if you have development rights and there's an eligible receiving site, you can't transfer them because you're in historic districts. This will just allow you to use the existing mechanisms in the historic district. It will also allow individual landmarks in R1 to R5 districts to transfer the development rights. I want Keith to clarify where we have landmarks in this district.
They're uncommon in this district, although we're right next to one. But individual landmark buildings I saw were not super common. There's buildings.
Sears, question mark?
There-
King's
I have a
Theater,
map
question
on
mark, And, Dutch Reformed Church, question mark.
Yes. I have the map up if
Yeah.
it's helpful
Well,
to put
there-
it
Yeah,
up.
and so the only thing that I would say is that the buildings that are within a historic district those buildings are not automatically landmarked and they would not be participating in this program.
Those three are not.
Yeah. But buildings that are landmarked,
Individual.
well, what I'm saying is that being in a historic district is not what makes you a landmark. Like being designated, your building being designated a landmark is what designates you a landmark unless you possibly participate in this program. And what it means is that in the past, you could participate, but you could only send your excess development right, unused development rights to the lot that's right next to you. Now you can send your unused development rights to the lot that's like maybe two houses down or 3 houses down or something like this.
So I have several people, so I'll do board member Minnick, then Mullen, then Denise, and then Alvarez. So Minnick, please.
I just had a question. For eligible receiving sites, is there any limit on the number of air rights that they can, that any one buyers they could buy?
That depends on, how much the development rights are available from the landmark is the limiting factor. But again, if they need bulk modifications, so for example, they're also limited by like how much their zoning envelope would allow them to build. And if they need bulk modifications, they would have to pursue an authorization of the C3.
Otherwise, the sky's the limit.
In terms of, how much, I guess, if a landmark had infinite development, obviously that's not true, but like if a landmark had a lot of development rights, they could theoretically transfer them to an eligible receiving site.
Unused development rights. So
Yes.
a lot of the landmarks have already used a portion of the development. We don't have access once it's spare, so.
Gotcha, thank you. So I have board member Mullen, and then Denise, and then Alvarez, and then district manager Campbell.
The first question is, this is as of right?
No, they would still be pursuing a discretionary review, depending on whether or not they needed bulk modifications, they'd be pursuing this certification development stage.
So we're saying we have a couple of landmark districts.
No buildings.
Only individual landmarks.
Say
Not
that-
for districts, it's 4 buildings. So the Sears building, think Sears, think King's Theater, think.
Austin
Dutch
Park
Reformed Church.
South,
No, that's a district.
that does not,
Correct.
it's not countable.
Correct.
That's correct. The reason I explained the caveat about the historic district is I'm not aware of landmarks that are in historic districts, but in some areas there are individual landmarks that are within historic districts. And so that's the only case in which it would apply to a historic district.
Like
Individual
if the church
landmarks.
on Dorchester, Tompkins, whatever church was landmarks, then it might count, but it isn't, so it doesn't. It's just, I think it's really just, I think those are the 3 and maybe Liz knows.
Train station?
Oh, the train station.
The train station is, there's a few more. I was just gonna offer, I have a map link that we could put up there.
So the individual landmark owner would have to approve this. They would
They would want to sell it, then the TLC would have to provide the authorization.
But they would have to want to do it. Nobody could-
And if, for whatever reason, I don't think we have any, there might be a landmark in a historic district. If there is a landmark that's also in a historic district, the sites that are receiving those, if they want to use that, they have to go through LPC.
That doesn't make me happy.
So it's the authorization and the LPC,
For sharing families.
but there isn't. I believe that.
Thank you.
I was just gonna note that there are a few that we haven't mentioned. There's also the Johannes Van Nuys house, which is around Avenue J and East 22nd. There's also the Flatbush Town Hall and Erasmus High School, the Academy of Humanities over at Flatbush and Church. Since, we don't have the map, I'm just looking at LPC's map. And then I believe 2227 to 2323 Beverly Road. In addition to the Reformed Church, the Avenue H station. So it is very small. Anyone wants to see this, it's here.
And so I have, sure, so I have board member Alvarez and board member Washington, and then did you have a comment too? And then I'll go through most of them. Okay.
I do.
So board member Alvarez and then board member Washington.
All right, so just to clarify the process then, only if the building is within the historic district does it end up at LPC, which means it ends up in front of us, correct? Otherwise, if it's a building that's outside of the district, if it's just a standalone historic structure, then it's just a CPC authorization or certification as a right.
Yes, because the LPC would have oversight over a non, a site that is not a landmark or historic.
No, I'm saying a standalone.
Yeah, you're talking about, I'm sorry, I might have, but you're talking about individual landmark transferring to a general site, a site that is.
Correct.
And so LPC has no review in that.
But does the
capacity.
public have a different review outside of the LPC process? Is there a public review at all?
Yeah, there's the discretionary action for all of these, regardless of whether they're in the historic district or not in the historic district.
Wait, do those discretionary actions go to community boards?
Yes.
Authorization and certification?
And I
don't know.
I believe they, so I'm not a community board planner, I'm the text amendment specialist.
Okay, so that's an open question.
The authorization, I've worked on authorization previously.
I
and
feel
they-
like, I hear commission.
So that's something to validate. So I'll take, so here's the final order stuff. So I'll take board member Washington, and then I'll take board member Phillips, and then Prasant, and then, okay, and that's how.
I'll save mine until after we're done.
Okay, gotcha. So board member Washington.
So I just want to clarify, why would this be an option to sell unused development rights? I think that's where I'm confused. Why is that even an option?
It was a major court case. I don't want to go too much into the details, but basically like it was declared unconstitutional to allow a building to not, like to landmark a building and say you can't build anything else on there or like change the building without allowing that building to like be compensated because it was litigated. It was like a famous, like Penn Central, like the Penn Station was like.
The general rationale is that if you have a landmark building, a building that's been landmarked, there's, you want to preserve it for these landmark reasons. And that means that it cannot access its development rights. It, might be granted, whatever, 6 FAR, let's say, for just to choose a number. And they've only used 2 of it, it's landmark building. That means they own development rights for 4, additional FAR. But they can't use it on the site because it's a landmark. They have no place to put it while following the landmark rules. They would, be altering the site if they were to add that additional FAR on site. So this mechanism was created in order for them to sell it, which will also help to, support the landmark. Maintaining a landmark is extremely expensive. It would also help to support maintaining the landmark while also allowing, those development rights to be transferred to an appropriate receiving site that could develop them without, interfering with the landmark.
And so I have board member Phillips.
So the case you mentioned was that the Supreme Court ruling that preserved Grand Central Terminal?
Correct. Yeah, so when Grand Central, they wanted to build a big tower on top of it. And so basically the landmarks process allowed
I
them.
understand.
Yeah.
So I'm just, it doesn't seem to me, it seems to me that this change is benefiting an individual owner and not a community. I think, for example, we are enriched by having Grand Central Terminal when we lost Penn Station. So to me, getting rid of this, are enacting this particular, whatever it is, it's not necessarily good, in my opinion.
Yeah, hear your opinion, respect that. I just want to, explain that the benefit to the community is both that this would generate, appropriate development opportunities. So, housing in an appropriate location, not on the landmark site. It would also support the preservation of that landmark by generating revenue for them. Obviously you're entitled to your opinion, but that is the rationale behind that. So
Okay. I just did not see that rationale clearly. Obviously, I have my opinion, but I didn't, I wanted some clarification about the rationale for it.
Can I clarify one thing with authorization?
Yes, please do.
Authorizations go to the community board, certifications do not. So if they needed bulk modifications, for pursuing an authorization, you would see that.
You're talking about a CPC authorization that's come before.
A CBC authorization goes.
All right, so that's the difference. If they have bulk modification, we'll end up getting it, but it's not.
Exactly.
Okay.
District manager and then.
Yeah, just a quick, just to bring it home, if we do look back at the Sears building, we know right now, currently, there's an as-of-right development for 600 units of housing like on the lot. So Sears could have, under this, Sears would have been able to, or will be able to, transfer the development rights that would have been over their landmarked building and would have allowed that developer to add additional bulk or additional height bulk, which all of the above, to this as of right development, and it would.
Sorry, are you asking if they would have, the Sears building would not have any additional development rights under this proposal? This doesn't.
But they would transfer the development rights that they would have over their building, that they can't build over their building, much like Grand Central couldn't build on top of Grand Central. And they could have handed off to Clipper Equity, which is developing the as of right 600 units of development, more to build.
Well,
No, they
is
would-
that building adjacent to?
Yes. No.
They could
Yeah,
have done
they
it already.
would still have the same amount of development rights to transfer to that site. They could have transferred them to another site that's like across, that's across the intersection, for example, like of the block. So it's not about that this doesn't change how many development rights these sites have to exchange. It changes
Broadens
where.
their
Exactly.
radius.
Exactly, where they can give them.
Thank you.
Okay, gotcha. And so, given the conversation that we had on this, do I have a motion on the floor?
No? All right, I'll make a motion to accept it as written.
Second.
Okay, so, all right, all those in favor, please raise your hands.
Aye.
So all those opposed? Any abstentions? Any ineligible? So the motion carried. Okay, so now we are on to the railroad right of way. So, 30 let me set some time up for this one. So this one is 5 minutes, so DCP could definitely use your help in summarizing what this one is.
Yeah, this is, I will say is a pretty confusing one, so bear with me, but. Exactly, yeah. So, yeah, I would say, I think there's very limited applicability in this district. But, so today, there's the existing special permit for, developing on a railroad right-of-way or former railroad right-of-way. So a place that any railroad operator, including the MTA or regional rail operator, owns. There is a special permit to develop that site. This special permit is essentially unusable. It doesn't have a definition of what counts as a railroad right-of-way, so almost no one knows if it's applicable or how they could use it. And also, to demonstrate something as a former railroad right-of-way, you have to research the history of the railroad and what date the railroad use was discontinued, which is almost impossible to find out, as applicants to this special permit have discovered, much to their chagrin. So what this proposal aims to do is introduce clear definitions of a railroad right-of-way and a former railroad right-of-way for any site where a railroad operator has a legal agreement to have a railroad right-of-way on a site would be a railroad right-of-way. And any site where that use discontinues after the date of adoption of City of Yes for Housing Opportunity would become a former railroad right-of-way. So it's a forward-looking proposal, not requiring this backward-looking research. It would create a process for those sites to develop. The site would have to pursue, again, an authorization or a certification, depending on how large the site is. Large sites would have to pursue the higher level of review and authorization because these are, large, skinny sites. And so they often require some sort of review to make sure that the bulk is appropriate. That was part of the intention of the original special permit. And also the authorization and certification remain in place to make sure that the train operator has approved of this development and that the development would not interfere with railroad operations, which is the purpose of the railroad right-of-way special permit originally.
So I have board member,
Just two-part question. First of all, does this even apply to this district? And second of all, is there any sort of review with the community board or it's just really internal administrative?
Yeah, so there is no map of like every railroad right of way or former railroad right of way in the city, because as I mentioned, part of the issue with this is it's hard to identify where those sites have existed. So I don't want to like speak definitively, but I'm not sure this has, broad applicability in your district. I don't know, your way of, some places have seen this special permit try to, take shape and fail. I don't think that's happened recently in this district. But your cycle for planning board review, the authorization was for the used for it. So if they need, if it's a large site, they would, you'd see that. I'm sure for the street for the
do I have any other questions from board members on Zoom? Okay, so hearing none, do I have a motion?
Second.
Okay. And so all those in favor, please raise your hand.
I don't think these things go wrong. Skinny. I don't want to have this down.
Use wrong street on. So then all those opposed, please raise your hand. Any abstentions? Or abstentions?
Oh.
Yep. The abstentions, raise your hands again. Yep.
No, we're not done that. We're gonna actually.
Okay, so then this motion carries. Give me a second.
Yes, that's it.
Now we get to the.
Voted on it for.
So folks, what this means is, we have finished going through the 15 items, but we are not done because we now need to do two things. Some of which we stop the timer. So what we need to do is, as a group, the first thing is we need to discuss an item that was already ratified. And the reason is because there's information that came forward and there's a question of, there's a chance that DCP may have given information that the board used to make that decision that was not entirely accurate. So we need to revisit that. And then I'm gonna put a time limit on that conversation. And then after that, we as a board do need to come to a general consensus on how we view this application, not the application, but how we view the zoning text amendment, because when we submit this to the Department of City Planning, in addition to putting our recommendations for each of the 15 items, there is an overall, do you approve or do you disapprove of this item? So that is what we have. And so I am going to set the timer for 10 minutes for the first part of this conversation. And then I will point to board member Bolton. So here we go.
All right, what we're discussing is item 3, district fixes low density. The paper that we received says adjust requirements to allow for 0.1 through 0.25 additional FA line. As the 3X, we are at 0.6. This would allow, well, I asked because that's a bit of a range. So I asked DCP at that meeting, and they said that in a 3X, we would get an additional 0.15, meaning that our FAR would go from 0.6 to 0.75. And we approved that. It's reasonable to approve that. If you consider that in the rezoning of 2009, DCP wanted the 4X, I mentioned this earlier, which was a 0.9, to get about 80% compliance. The 3X at 0.6 had us at about 50%. It was actually 49, 51, and I forget which was which. So to go to 0.75 probably brings us out to about 65% compliance, which means not many houses are small enough to actually utilize this in any meaningful way. And the meaningful way is that you can go from a 30-foot rear yard to a 20-foot rear yard. That's a big difference if you live adjacent or near that. Also, to go from 8-foot side yards to 5-foot. Okay, but 0.75 was not a problem. But it turns out that there is additional language that says in community districts 11, 14, and 15, that this is going to a 1.0 FAR. That's huge. For us, that's huge. It means that anyone, pretty much, with money, who wants to enlarge their house can. Very, very few houses in our district have so much bulk that they don't have room to move into a 1. Right? Now, my personal opinion here is that our original approval, seeing as how we were given incorrect information, should just be eliminated. You forget about it. And we start again, discuss it, and vote on it. Now, maybe the vote will be the same, maybe we'll disapprove it, I don't know. I know what I will do, but I'm not trying to, but this should not stand as is my opinion. Thank you.
So
Is that a motion to revisit? Is that the best procedural way to go about it?
it would be a motion to revisit, yes,
All
but
right, then I make a motion that we revisit this and start from scratch with the new information.
so then, given that we have a motion on the floor.
Second.
Okay, so then, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. So,
6.
It should be stated, it's just for the motion to revisit the question.
Yes.
yeah, so let me restate the motion. And so the motion is to revisit the decision that the community board had made regarding item 3, which is district fixes. Right, in light of new information.
Just simply to discuss it and then make a motion to vote. This is just to revisit it as if we hadn't looked at it before.
So that's the motion that's on the floor. And so those in favor, could you raise your hands, please?
10.
Okay. Those against, please raise your hands.
5.
Okay. Any abstentions?
1.
2 abstentions. Abstentions.
Counting still, sir.
Any another? Oh, okay. Board Member Alvarez?
Yeah, if I can just add one more thing. So I think the quirk in it is that the attempt of the revision for the community 14 or community district 14 general language was to do away with the special permit in our Midwood section, right? To try to do away with that special permit process. But in that process, it created this issue in the northern end of the district where it sort of countervails what, the previous work on the 2009 rezoning had gone for in terms of the density that was targeted for that part of the district. So it's sort of a disconnect because it was sort of broadened because the existing language talks about how that special permit that allows up to 1.0, that's specified in a very particular part of the district, just that area in the southerly part. However, with this amendments, it would basically open up that 1.0 FAR to the entire district in the districts where it would be affected. So it kind of perhaps could be over-inclusive in terms of, what the targeted intention was, or at least of, perhaps our understanding. So I don't know if there's any clarification.
Yeah,
Right.
where this special permit is available, we have heard from some communities where it's available, including some of your neighbors to the south, that almost everyone pursues this special permit, and that it's in fact, the process costs of this special permit are built into the house sale price, so that it's expected that you'll pursue this special permit and that you'll get the 1.0 FAR. And so, they've been asked to remove that process since it's expected to be received anyway in that location where it's available today. So that's the rationale behind removing the discretionary review.
So I have, I saw board member Denise, then board member Person.
So to clarify, this would affect the entire, just a question, first question, and then a comment. This would affect the entirety of District 14 or only the special permit, the price for the special permit is now?
It would only apply when the special permit is available now, which are in certain districts within.
So the part where it says the special 1.0 FAR in District 14 is not throughout all of District 14. It would only be in the southerly part where it's currently allowed.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So this is in fact not misinformation. Just to clarify, that would mean that the location one is.
That's what's being debated. There's a lack of clarity. We've heard both
Current
things.
language specifies that below, it only the southerly portion of community 14, District 14. But the new language removes that designation, that specific designation, and actually has the bounded areas. But the new language opens it up and says, oh, well, the 1.0 will apply beyond that. It applies across the entire district.
So the question is, which language is the right language?
Was that intended, or that's, I think, what we're trying to.
This says clearly for R1 through R3 districts and community districts 11, 14, and 15 in the borough of Brooklyn, the maximum floor area ratio set forth in section shall be increased to 1.0. Doesn't say anything about special district.
Okay.
So it's about everything.
Sure. I guess my second question is just, we've been hearing a lot about how all of the areas of Victoria and Flatbush are considered together. And I guess we sometimes say that, but not with this particularly. I've just been hearing a lot of testimony that has said that all, this is one neighborhood that should have similar things applied, but then also we're saying actually, it just feels a little inconsistent to me to potentially try to carve out some of our district to not allowing for these changes. But I just wanted to raise that as a comment that was just trying to distill testimony that we've heard today.
Thank you. And so I have board member Person and then board member Cohen.
Well, I think as I'm now hearing it described, the possible wholesale change it could have to the demeanor of so many areas in our district is just unfathomable. I mean, there's no way we could predict what the effects would be. And that's been my watchword throughout this entire CBS process. Now, I'll save my nasty ass comments for the next comments period here. But for now, I think that, I could not be clear. I mean, as it is, we fight out the special district permits, and you've heard the various people who come and felt so aggrieved that the thought, first of all, to make those as of right, is one of the few things that I think this board spends time assiduously and carefully analyzing when these neighbors and the petitioners come to us. And I just feel, veer a little bit into what my last comments are, that basically all of these are attempts at deregulation and attempts at pulling the last few teeth the community boards have. So I'll finish with that and I'll go on later.
Thank you. So I have board member Cohen and then that will be time.
So I guess just what I'm hearing is there's ambiguity regarding whether the 1.0 applies to the southern part of the district versus the entire district. It seems like there's some legitimate concern in the Victorian Flatbush area that 1.0 is too high. That's what Glenn was starting with. So I'm wondering if we could, basically take whatever our decision was before and add a condition saying that the 1.0 only applies south of the railroad cut and you go from there.
So that is time. Oh, wait, so shoot. Actually, let me get one more. I'll get board member Washington, board member Washington.
So from my understanding from the last time we voted on this, there was supposed to be clarification to other New York City agencies in reference to doing more investigation on this proposal. So is that the, I just want to clarify, was that the situation on this? Because, especially with reducing, rear yard requirements, I think people had issues in reference to, the property line. Property line also, I think, there was issues with the fire zones and stuff like that. So I just want to make sure that, you know, with this, we did vote yes, although I voted no. It was approved because I think we did a proposal, or amendment allowing more clarification with New York City agencies. So, I'm hoping that can still stand in reference to how this is, gonna move forward.
Thank you for that, Board Member Washington. So yes, so to remind folks what the decision was last
Do you want
time.
me to read it directly from the minute?
Oh, yeah.
You have it right there? You go.
Just a point of clarification.
Yes, and then I'll.
Thank you. Just so that you're aware, the special district was designed because most of the properties are pretty small. 32 feet wide, some are smaller than that. So the 1.0 allowed for decent sized houses. When you come up north, we're on 40 by 100, 45, 50, 60 by 100. 1.0 is huge on those large plots. The housing is not necessarily huge. Right? My house is maybe 3,800 square feet. Now I can go to 5,000. Now, it doesn't matter what my neighbors say. All I have to do is build. As of right, all I have to do is build. This is not what we voted on the first time. No, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. And so the recommendation that was approved, that passed in the public hearing and was ratified by the board was to approve district fixes with the following conditions. Follow up with other city agencies. Require permeable pavement around the lot to replace the 10 feet by X feet of rear yard and its contribution to capture stormwater and runoff. And also require a public review for applications to combine adjacent units. So that is the recommendation that was ratified by the board in regards to district fixes. And so we've had our discussion period for this. And so given the discussion, do I have a motion? So.
Motion to have the same motion, but exclude the Black Ledge rezoning area.
Can you repeat that again, please? Board Member?
The same condition, to approve with conditions, including all of the previous conditions, but to exclude the area of the 2009 Flatbush rezoning.
Okay.
Can I just turn that around and say, if this makes sense, to say instead to preserve the existing, that it apply to the existing special permit area?
Oh, yeah, sure, that's fine.
Okay.
I was trying to figure out the way that we can, I heard a thing that said maybe we can't just say to exclude, add the special permit, but I'm fine with, that's fine, friendly.
Okay, so I'm not clear what we're.
So we're adding the condition that the 1.0 FR be allowed only in the current special permit district. And if
But
you
we're approving allowing that.
returning to the original language so that it is only allowed in the special permit district, which this board has approved 1.0 FARs for years.
No, I got that, but in terms of what this motion is to approve this
To approve with conditions.
With the additional condition.
That's, I can't vote for that. All right, go ahead.
And so just to repeat, the motion on the floor is to approve with the following conditions. Follow with other city agencies, require permeable pavement around the lot to replace the 10 feet by X feet of rear yard and its contribution. Yep.
Point of order, I'm sorry, because that was already resolved by this board, it seems like it's redundant to re-vote on that, and you would get a different number because we have a different mix of people in the room.
Yes.
So this would only be a recommendation to add a condition to the already approved item 3, that condition being what Greg said, and then take the vote, and that member would be approving that. It's committee of the whole would be doing that.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense? And
Yes.
No, I'm sorry, I don't understand that. So we're not able to knock out everything, or basically what's approved is already approved and it's just adding something else?
Well, because we did reopen it. So I think to your point that may make sense because we reopened it and to reconsider, right? We opened it to reconsider, so.
But it
I
wasn't.
think you're actually making a good point.
If you approve, then it goes the way this motion is.
Right, there's already.
If enough people disapprove, then a new motion can be made. That's just the way this works.
okay, then I'm gonna back up.
But I've received some, I phoned a friend. Sorry, I wish I had received this question in advance so I could have looked into it. But I've just asked our director of zoning to explain this, all the like, text interpretation issue. And so by striking this out, they would just follow the underlying zoning is the explanation that he has conveyed to me. So I've just asked him for confirmation about the 0.75 for R3X. So I don't think it's accurate that they would be receiving a bump in the R3X districts. The R2 districts would be receiving their bump of 0.75 as well.
And I think we should disapprove absent clarification of their language.
There's a motion on the
So
floor.
there's already a motion on the floor, and then I have a question
Did
from.
we say that we were revisiting this because of bad information or inaccurate? So then it should stand, because if the decision was made in terms of inaccurate information, then we do have a right to revisit it.
Sure.
We are.
My motion, I partly said to approve because it sounds like this would be potentially revisiting only the part that we were concerned about, and to clarify that we, this would clarify the approval in the area we believed we had previously voted on. I made this motion partly because I believe it, but also because I think it best reflects what everyone who was at the previous meetings had already believed we were voting on as well.
Point of order, yes.
If this motion does not pass, would we be allowed to vote the motion to disapprove?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, no, I just didn't know if we are obliged to sort of tack on
No,
to what we had.
make it.
Or can we, I just.
So I'm not sure what motion is on the floor right now. I'm sorry.
It's not on the law.
It was my,
Recommended.
yeah,
It was your motion reiterated by Greg?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so will you repeat that motion? Because it is on the floor and it has to either move forward or
Has to move forward.
it has to move forward.
Okay, we're done. All right, so motion to approve with the previous conditions, which included agencies, observance of, observance of
Permeable paving.
permeable paving and drainage, and added on to
Public process for conjoining lots.
Yes.
public process for conjoining lots, and the preservation of, or the designation of the 1.0 FAR only within the pre-existing special permit area.
Yeah.
That works.
Yeah, that's it.
Is there a second?
Second. Just for
I also.
So given that we have a second, all those in favor, please raise your hand. So all those opposed?
2, 3, 6, 7.
Any abstentions?
2, motion does not,
What happened?
Right.
does not carry.
So the motion does not carry.
No motion.
What was the actual
Okay.
numbers?
It was 8 in
7.
favor, 7 opposed, and 2 abstaining.
And so, board member Seal,
A motion to disapprove because of the imprecise language in the text.
Can I suggest?
Disapprove.
Friendly amendment, just.
Disapprove. Disapprove. The board, the DCP people here hear us.
Okay, but we should make that a little bit clearer. If you agree, disapprove unless clarified language is shown to limit to the special district.
Well, no.
I would make,
I think was better.
I would I'm sorry, I would just make a clean motion to approve,
Just,
It's
to
already,
approve, without any conditions, and I would switch my vote to yes.
Second.
yeah,
Oh, there was, I'm sorry.
Motion is on the floor.
I'm sorry, I realized that.
motion on the floor to disapprove and
Disapprove.
period.
What's
Straight
the-
up.
Was there a
Second.
condition though, like
Nope.
just disapprove?
Yes, motion to disapprove. And I second it.
So there has to be a vote.
So now we're voting. So this is a motion to disapprove outright. So those in support of disapproving district fixes outright, please raise your hand. Got 8.
Sorry again, please.
Okay, keep your hands up, folks. Sorry about that.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Oh, I'm sorry. Carl's right.
All right. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay. All right. Any abstentions? Any opposed? I already have that. Any ineligible? Yeah. So we're split. It's a deadlock.
So since the motion does not carry, I make my motion to approve without any conditions.
And second.
You don't want abstentions.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Updates on this, because I wanted to, I did not receive this question in advance, so I wanted to make sure that, we would have looked into this in advance, but, okay, so for 23-243 of the new text, your interpretation is correct. They would get 1.0 FAR throughout all of Brooklyn Community 14, Community District 14, as well as 11 and 15, where it is already applicable throughout the community district. So just to clarify, yours is correct, so like, any modification, like to limit it to the existing zoning area would state, like, those would be reasonable suggestions or what this would
Good, get that last.
Like, I'm just saying that your interpretation is correct, it's not already limited to the.
It applies across the board.
Exactly. So if that.
FAR bonus, all of it.
So then one.
Can-
There's a motion on the table.
Motion on the
Can I make an amendment to the motion to?
That would only apply below the, to already what's a special district.
We did that.
No, the other one had a bunch of
That other
conditions.
conditions.
This one is just-
In addition.
Yeah.
A motion to approve with the condition that it only apply to the current special permit district.
Correct.
Second.
That makes sense.
Got you back to square one. Doesn't matter. Anyway, yeah.
So I gotta wait.
We're going to subscribe.
Not with the city council.
So here we go, folks. And so we're voting on the motion to approve this. With this district fixes only applying to the current special district. And so, all those in favor, please raise your hand.
Give me a minute.
Yeah, 50 titles.
One.
You don't want to approve.
That is where I just made my head on the table.
It's different.
If it's in there, I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Right.
It's what, yeah.
How many ways? That's 10.
There we go.
Right.
So. It's fine, I mean.
All those opposed? Way than that, so. And any abstentions? Any ineligible? So what I have is the motion to approve, with only, the motion to approve, and that this only, district fixes only applies to the current special district. That carries.
Already advanced, we real.
We have one more.
Oh, wow.
Well, then we have the, as a board, we have to do this on
Because
the
they don't change the language, you know, it's not gonna hold.
So folks, it's 9:28, and so, gonna put a hard cap on, I'm gonna do my best to hard cap on this for 17 minutes. We're out of here by 9:45, so give you some. And, oh, we have to get it.
Faster, you never know. You'll stay.
Yeah. It could become.
So here's the deal, so we as a board need to come to consensus on what is our overall take on the city of Yes Housing Opportunity. Do we approve it or do we disapprove it? Because for our submission,
Good.
yeah, I know, I'm just like, I know how, I'm just setting the thing for people where for the submission in the zoning application portal, there will be space for each of the individual 15 items to put our recommendations. But there is also a piece that asks for an overall recommendation. And so this is the conversation that we're having for the overall recommendation. And so I will take board member comments and then we'll have to come to some sort of consensus on that. So I see board member Prasad and then board member Denise and then board member Woman.
What we have learned in all of our discussions, at City of Yes, is that the ramifications, the repercussions of even some of the smallest changes they've recommended will be so far reaching. And we're just looking at CB14. We're making decisions, as other people have pointed out, that will have effects on the other millions of residents of this city. None of us could wrap our heads around what should properly be done with all these proposals. One of these, little teeny, like one of the 15, would have occupied a community board in the days when I started working in zoning, et cetera, for a month or two. And to have all of this thrown at us just before the summer break, which is very typical, I might add, as Sean has pointed out, is it's a war crime in zoning terms. It is just absolutely impossible for me, or I dare say, even one of them, if it had all been presented to them in this amount of time, to come up with a proper assessment of what is going to happen to New York City because of all of these unbelievably traumatic changes. I myself, there's no way I could possibly advocate for a yes overall to this plan, simply for those reasons.
Thanks. Thank you, board member Prasad. So I have board member Denise, then board member Woolen, and then board member Parker.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that of the 15 proposals, we had yes with conditions or yes on 12 of them. Additionally, we've heard a lot of testimony throughout, testimony from the public and also from board members that we are supportive of more housing. I think that it would be a misreflection of, I think of course everything has consequences and we will see how they bear out, and we will certainly see more housing proposals in front of this board and in front of the city over time. But reflecting on what we have said, we look like we are approving with conditions. Our conditions may be strong, which they are, and I think we can iterate them, reiterate them again in this section if we want to talk about things, like I think especially the transit-oriented development one, trying to, focus on the Flatbush rezoning, and saying that we've already accounted for that in that, would be amenable to me. But, I think in general, if we want to show that we are a serious board in terms of trying to, develop more housing and to work on this housing affordability crisis, we shouldn't just say no because the vibe is, I don't know, I don't really see how we can be in favor of all of these proposals, and be in favor, even the ones we're disapproved of, if those conditions were met, we would be in favor of them. How it would be reflective of our opinion to do anything otherwise.
Thank you, board member Denise. So I have Woolen, Parker, and then district manager Kemp.
The first, I'd like to point out that ECP has admitted that they have done no research, zero, on how this will apply on the ground, any of them, any place. Okay, this is something that is being pushed from above, probably the mayor's office, and he just wants it across the board. Now, I happen to be very much in favor of affordable housing, and we have in place zoning laws that allow for affordable housing, and it is in fact happening. We have in place areas where you can build much bigger housing. Developers haven't taken full advantage, although some. Look on 4th Avenue and see what's happened there, right? A long run of 12-story buildings. So there are already many things that exist. The areas of this that specifically work towards increasing affordable housing, I generally agree with. I think that there are losers in every case, but that I generally agree with. A few of them I voted yes on because I felt like they would do little damage. But most of them will do a lot of damage to existing communities. You put up a 4 or 5 story building where you've got a row of Victorian houses and every house on that block's value just went down. You've changed the nature of the community. So as a general statement, having this whole process thrust at us, forced on us in such a timeless manner, I have to be absolutely against it as a general statement. Thank you.
So next we have Board Member Parker, and then I have District Manager Campbell, and then I have Board Member Phelps, then Minnick, then Siegel. So Parker.
I think as a board, I've been hearing us discuss the process that City of Yes went through versus what's in City of Yes. And while I completely agree and I'm in agreement with like timeliness and we can send those recommendations and give that feedback, I do think as a board, we do have responsibility to what was proposed inside of the City of Yes tax amendment. And to Denise's point, we did approve almost more than a majority of what's in this. So like, I think as a board, if we say we're disapproving City of Yes because of the process versus what's being proposed in it, like we aren't serving our board at a high level. And we have a responsibility. There's always unforeseeable consequences for things that are put into place. But I think as a board, when we approve, we put conditions as best as we can to address some of the consequences we think are going to be present. So I think erring on the side of like, we do have a responsibility to choose whether we approve or disapprove what's in the amendment that's currently present. I do think we should move to approval because we did approve almost majority of what's in it. And then I do think we can comment on the process, which I don't agree with, but I do think what's in front of us, we have responsibility to make a decision on. And I think based on what we, as a board here today and what has happened in the past 5, when it was more people present and others present, we approve majority of it. So I'm naming that I think we should move for approval.
Okay, thank you for that, Board Member Parker. So I have District Manager Campbell, then Phelps, and then Minnick, and then Siegel.
Yeah, I'm totally sensitive to the gesture of disapproving something that there's so much approval woven into. But I think that the approval does demonstrate that this is a board that is serious about the aspirations of the zoning text amendment. And I just feel like as the person sort of in the office, we're kind of left holding the bag of the board decisions and dealing with the service delivery that will come out of it. And I think there are so many unknown unknowns in this that we haven't had the depth of exploration. So I think it's okay to ask our friends at DCP to do better. Our community deserves better. I think a local look at the environmental impact statements is not out of line to demand before making a recommendation to approve. I think, and even the interaction within this zoning text amendment, like when we asked about how the quality housing would impact within the shared housing, that's still an unknown. And heavens, we don't, like the interaction of City of Yes for carbon neutrality plus City of Yes for economic opportunity plus City of Yes for, I can come up with a hysterical kind of like what this could become, like the Frankenstein that could result from how we don't know the impact of the interactions of these 3 zoning text amendments. So I think it's okay. It's not, I don't think it would make this board look like it lacks seriousness, especially to demand affordable housing, because we did build 2,600 units of as of right housing, market rate housing from 2010 to 2020. It didn't get cheaper in this district to live here when that happened. And this doesn't even anticipate that many additional units of housing per district. Thank you. Just from a service delivery point of view, thanks for letting me have some say here.
No problem. So I have Board Member Phelps, Board Member Minnick, and then Board Member Siegel.
I am relatively new to this board, and I certainly understand that city planners don't always give communities the opportunity to weigh in. And we've seen some really bad things happen to communities in the last 50 years with planners deciding what is best. However, I want to ask people, when we weigh the physical and the social in the City of Yes, which one is at the top. You know, sometimes we oppose things because it changes the physical. But what are the social benefits of those changes? I think that is what I'm asking myself in terms of what is proposed, even if there should have been, and certainly could have been more time and more research. But I think some of what is proposed will benefit the community socially.
Thank you very much for the comments. So I have Board Member Minnick and Board Member Siebel.
I just wanted to say, I know this whole process was very frustrating at times for a lot of people, and I can definitely relate to that. I definitely want to echo what my colleagues have said about yes to the process and that being such an important piece of it. And I think that I think for myself, like one of the things that I keep seeing in this is that I think in the various pieces here, the CBS, all of these pieces are planning much more for a more macro level, whereas we as community members we live every day in this community and we see things on a much more micro level. And I think that that's a big difference as well. And something that obviously planning for a citywide level, I think there's some lost in translation pieces and elements there. But I think that in terms of like the feedback that gets taken back, it doesn't need to be as black and white to say that do we approve or disapprove of the whole process. There are good pieces and bad pieces. And there's been a lot of frustrations, but also good elements as well as to everything that we have been able to take back. And communication pieces as well, or if we can say approve, but with conditions, and here's what you're getting from CB14.
Thank you for that, Board Member Minnick. So I have Board Member Siebel and then Board Member Smith.
Just to my fellow board members, in 2009, we're very serious about dealing with housing. We engaged in several years of serious, 4.5 years of serious thought about housing in our neighborhood. And I don't know who said it, why don't we just go to every community and leave it up to the community to figure out a plan? I don't know who said it tonight. And I thought that just highlighted the gross deficiencies here, that they made no effort at community engagement, none, zero. And you say, well, we approved all these things, but everything got layered with conditions. Everything, there was a million conditions. And it was because we had to layer it with conditions because they didn't engage in that community engagement. And we have a duty to demand on behalf of our neighborhood, on behalf of our community district, that they do it right. Not that, what's the expression, the imperfect instead of the perfect, No, we have a right and a duty to demand that they do it right. That's it.
Okay, thank you. I have Board Member Smith.
This is just really, it's heart-wrenching because tonight, these hours we spent here and we were doing so many things and it was only maybe one that we started off with, okay, we're not gonna do it. But everything you could see what we were all putting into this, especially on the affordability of housing for those who so desperately need it, including some of us in here. So it's just heart-wrenching that after we've gone through all of this, and we do need to look at, okay, so-and-so screwed up, but who are we screwing up? That's what we need to be looking at. And how are they being affected? I'm fine, I have a place to live, I have no issues. But there's so many out there that don't have what we have. So I think we need to just think of all of this and still find a way to send a message to, and I know Eric Adams, I've met him, but we gotta find a way to get this message to them. We don't want to just stop everything where the communities that we serve and everything will not be getting what they need. But at the same time, we need to let them know that this is wrong. How they have put this out here is wrong and it's impacting
all of us. That's,
Thank you. So,
you know,
thank you very much for that, board member Swift. So we have 1 minute left, so I would like to bias any board members who haven't spoken yet, would like to say something. If you do, that's great. If not, then it's gonna have a-
Very good.
Board member
I
Bromson.
agree with, I think what you just said, 100% this is perfect, and what you said. I think this, watching this process and being a part of it, the comment that has been most consistent is that the process has been really challenging. It's been challenging for us as a board, it's pushed us against, not against each other, we're very tonight, but I think I agree that it feels a little bit disingenuous to submit a disapproval when we have, well, even with conditions, we as a board made those approvals and those are things that happen. And I think to disapprove is disingenuous, but I think an approval with very strong comments that we've all been shared tonight about the process and how this is not appropriate and all of those things feels important. But I don't think I think it is as strong to say we approve and back up the decisions that we've made as a board over the past several months with these comments. I think that's a strong way to do it.
Okay, and that's time. So thank you very much, board member Bromson, and thank you as well, everybody. We paused this. Give me a second. All right, there we go. Cool. Let's break it up. That's what we're good. So yeah, everyone, thank you for your comments on this. And so I'm trying to think, given the conversation we've had, what's the best way? I'm wondering basically, should I make a motion? Yep, let me put it this way. So the motion that I'm gonna ask is about the CB14 general approval or disapproval, right? This is separate from the recommendations we'll put in for each of the 15 items, right? So let me start it this way. Do I have a motion for CB14 zoning application submission for the city of Yes Housing Opportunity to be generally in favor of the zoning text amendment?
So moved.
And so all those in favor of that motion, please raise your hand.
This is like the approve with conditions.
Right now, it's
Just-
just.
This is just the general, because in the zoning application portal, there's two things. You have space to put in each of the recommendations for the 15 items, but there's also a general, do you approve of this plan or disapprove?
So the two options are approve and disapprove, and this is a motion for approve.
That's what you said.
Yes, so this is the motion for approving.
of the overall.
Overall, yes, this is what this is. And so,
What can we ask the satisfactory or non-satisfactory with these? This
No.
city of yes,
Yes, I'll do it.
or a very harsh yes.
Say,
You can only play their game their way.
you can disapprove, you can approve it.
Then you can add-
can you?
You can have conditions.
That's what I, yeah.
That's what I thought determined was.
What is DCP saying? Last I saw, there was a thumbs up or a thumbs down next to each
But
other.
there's still conditions.
There's approve with no conditions.
Okay.
We love it, every piece of it. There's approve with conditions. There's disapprove, no conditions, you just hate it. And then there's disapprove with conditions. These are the four options.
Okay.
Or abstain.
Or abstain.
With conditions.
Do not disapprove.
We've got a
Yes,
motion.
my motion is to approve with conditions.
Yeah.
So there was already a motion on the floor?
That was my motion, right?
I think because before we thought it was only two options, so, yeah.
I thought it was only as well too. I thought it was right, right? And so,
Can we?
Can I rescind my motion?
well, I would say there was already a motion that was on, right? And that was my motion. That was just to approve it outright.
I will note it was
No,
not
no, no.
duly seconded.
That's what she did. She
Yeah, it wasn't
made the
seconded.
motion, so we have
Yeah.
to vote it down if we're going for it.
It wasn't seconded.
It was second.
It was seconded. Who seconded?
I forget who was second.
Okay, I think that's
Yes.
There are no conditions
I think
right
so
now.
moved.
The motion on the floor is to approve with no conditions. That's the motion on the floor.
Can I get a clarity
Yeah.
for voting? Is there a way to strike a motion or do we have to go through the entire vote now that it's?
So the way you strike a motion
Voting
is.
it down.
Right, through the vote, so we have to
Yes,
go through the
so
vote.
the way you strike a motion down is, since it's been seconded, if the vote does not carry, then
Got
a new
it.
motion.
Yep,
gets
I'm just asking for Robert's.
No, yeah,
Got it.
understood.
Okay.
So just to recap again, the motion that's currently on the floor is to approve the city of Yes housing opportunity with no conditions, okay? And so all those in favor? All those opposed? Any abstentions? Anyone in Ella? So that motion does not carry. And so do I have a new motion on the floor?
Motion to approve with conditions.
Okay.
Second.
And so all those.
We have to know.
Well, the conditions are all of the ones that we've already discussed, as well as I would assume the conditions include, everything we've sent here already, which will be included. Also to note that we are, while we are generally in trying to figure out a way to have more housing and, we disapprove of this process. And we thought that this process was rushed, but that overall, we still think that, we should approve this with, we can make a lot, I think there's a lot of room for strong comments on the process within this approval, and that is the.
It's all nice, but none of those are conditions. So what are the conditions?
Well, all the conditions are literally the ones we voted on already, including like excluding Victorian Flatbush from the transit oriented development.
It wasn't in there. From.
No.
Yeah, recommendation.
Let's finish the overall.
So that.
That we just,
The conditions that would result from those comments would include, is it approve or disapprove? Approve with the condition that a community district level EIS be completed. And that, I don't know how you, sort of like you were assuming, like, and clarity on the interaction between all of the previous COI.
They should be.
Some forward. I don't know how you put that into approval, but the local EIS and zoning and affordability.
Yeah, I mean, if I can try, I mean, it would have to capture our deep conflict here, right? We approved 12 of them. So in spirit, we approve the proposals on an item by item basis.
Conditions.
condition on the conditions we already have, yes.
Right, right. But balanced against that is the pause that we have in just out and out approving this based on the partial information, I'll say, in terms of what we have at this point. And the manner in which, again, it was presented to us, and that, yes, there was lots of engagement up to the point until they had a 1,400 page documents, and then it's 60 days.
Yeah.
So we have, that's what we're trying to capture, I think.
I think it's simpler than that. I think we're trying to get rid of as of right. That we approve with the condition that the as of right status is eliminated and process is put in its place. That's what we put in a lot of these things.
But
Maybe you have to say it differently.
Yeah. Point of order, there is a,
So I see board member Denise.
point of order, there is a motion on the table to approve with these conditions.
But we don't know what the
Yeah,
conditions are. This is a
Well,
separate motion.
developed already, haven't we? All of the things we said before, it's there, it's not as if they're negated. So we have to say, we approve with examination of the conditions that we approve. We can't just forget it.
Examination of the conditions that we specified.
Yes, exactly.
Specified.
It's already there. We've spent all this time going through it. So it's not just an approval. They've got to look at what we said.
I wouldn't say examination, I
Well,
would say
what-
compliance.
Compliance, better word, yeah.
So then, okay, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. So then let me put this, rather folks.
Considerations.
Right, so, motion on the floor is to approve the City of Yes housing opportunity, with the conditions that implementation is in compliance with the conditions.
All the other conditions.
That CB14 has stated in each of the 15 items.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
How's that?
Yes.
Pretty well stated.
That was what I was attempting to make with the motion, so I appreciate your clarity in language.
Like all of yours.
Well, just put information, we did already approve the objection language as to process, right?
Yes.
That's already.
Yes, yep.
Yes.
Okay.
And the EIS is incorporated.
Yes.
And there's no statement on affordable housing.
Yep. So we did approve that.
Okay.
No, I said there's no statement on affordable housing
Yeah, that's
in our,
Oh, in our statement that we approved.
right.
Okay.
Okay. And so that's the motion. Do I have a second on the motion?
I said,
So does anyone need me to restate the motion?
Yes, please. Yeah, sure.
We should agree on that.
Sure. And so the motion on the floor, let me get this right the second time. Yeah. So the motion on the floor is to approve the City of Yes housing opportunity with the condition that implementation is in compliance with the conditions that CB14 stated within its submission of the 15 items.
And the other two pieces are the EIS. and-
As well as the community district-based EIS and our objections to the process.
Got you. So then,
For future, perhaps, maybe there's a way to say for future processes, we desire more time as a way to speak to that.
And the stakeholder, so that you have time to weigh in the development of the item.
okay, so.
And the affordable housing.
So rush.
Oh, we wanted to make sure.
Got you. Okay, so here we go. So, all right. So let me, I got it. Okay, so here we go. So the motion that's on the table. The motion on the table is to approve the City of Yes housing opportunity. With the condition that implementation is in compliance with the conditions stated with the respective items and also in accordance with the additional comments regarding the EIS, the overall process and stakeholder and community engagement.
No, the stakeholder and community engagement is part of the process.
Okay.
And there was a suggestion to add affordable housing, but I don't know what that,
Well, that there would be a more meaningful consideration. Yeah.
more meaningful consideration of
Yes.
affordable housing
Okay.
conditions. Does that wrap it up enough, or do you need it to work in?
No,
That.
the last statement is not clear enough, because
last
they're
statement is
building
not
this
clear.
whole package is for affordable housing. So we're talking about something specific about affordable housing.
So that
I think it's
comment-
stated more.
Yeah, so that comment was referenced with the AMI conversation, right? Because it was saying, I remember that with your.
Okay, you wanna leave it up?
Take a shot at it?
Well, maybe we should use the word targeted affordable housing or mandatory affordable housing, something like that. As opposed to the general statement that everything is affordable, because then it just whitewashes everything. So we're talking about something very specific.
Okay, I got it. Okay.
So expanding required affordability.
As a future thing, or what's
Well,
the,
it's still too general, because they're saying all of this is about affordability, and I don't buy it. But there's certain specific components in here that are targeted for affordability. It's all that and it requires that. That's what we're saying should be expanded.
Yes.
I think we're getting too much into, respectfully, I think we're getting too much into the weeds. The whole program is meant for affordability. I don't know if adding a comment.
I would also just note that this
It doesn't work. Totally. Lots of evidence.
is this, a point of order, this is originally my motion, right? Am I right?
Yes.
So I would say that the EIS, the stakeholder in the process, information is friendly. I would not say that the affordable housing language as we've proposed is friendly.
So it has to be voted on without that.
What are we doing?
The motion on the table is to approve with the condition that implementation be compliant with all of the conditions shown in 15 items considered by the board, including the language pre-approved at the last board meeting in regard to the EIS and the process.
The planning process, yeah.
So that's the
Yeah.
motion.
That was the motion, and I don't remember if it was seconded.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Then that's what has to be voted.
So that's what we're voting on now. And so all those in favor, please raise your hands.
No way.
Set up or down?
We should make
14.
Right, and very short.
So then, if they're not done yet, so then, all those opposed, please raise.
Pro board.
Any abstentions? Okay. Any eligible? Oh, yes, you are.
Great job.
Guys, thanks for the late night.
What's that?
Like something comes up, stuff is it's like, but I hear what you do, usually, yeah, you're absolutely right.
I guess my comment were is like, I think that it's good to clarify.
Yeah. I mean, I just read it. I feel like it was good. It's for
Yeah. I guess. I just find it odd.
Yeah, there's another chair. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Yeah, right? You know, right?
Yeah, I could complain about all of this, and we're not even over yet, you know, maybe.
Second Monday.
You know, so many more stuff.
It's written.
So thank you.
If you know,
How it's the customer, it's word is under.
nobody has.
Set, we're all set. Very. Words that they're.
Yeah, she's a.
Yeah. Holiday, so we can look at it still a national holiday. Thank you very much for all your thoughts.
Yeah, like what you were saying.
It's not, we're like.
I rely on her staff.
We'll see. It's time for Brian.
Right.
Well, first of all, let me say it this way. Every meeting that you fund. Most of the time, it's interesting or boring, it's not much recommendation.
If I know.
Once in a while.
Like permit housing.
Isn't necessarily.
That's why I think like they're good for the nuggets to 4,000.
Most important difference is.
I was also looking to have 10 to 20.
Right, trying to read.
A law popped up.
I was just, I think we have. I don't know, we have to.
Discussed so much, like what?
So the circumstance, the circumstances that are in play.
All right, everybody.
Good night.
Take you outside.
Yeah, let's get out of here. All right. Have a night, Carl.
You too as well, Greg.
All right.
Thank you.
Right? Yes.
I know it's usual you have a first type.
That was, I'm sorry. That was,
What?
That was really tough.
Being working, that's called the permeable,
So just.
took a gavel and it worked. We knocked. I wasn't sure it would. I was like, oh, I was looking like.